16th, 2017. I want to first recognize that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nations. I will also want to announce that tonight we're going to, our clerk tonight will be Acting Clerk Snellgrove, and we have a scheduled recess at 9 p.m. Originally it was for 10 minutes. It may go a little bit longer because Council is going to take advantage of that opportunity to finish some business that we did not complete during the in-camera session. Ms. Snellgrove, introduction of late items, please.
7A Event Center 2017 Non-Election Assent Voting Process Referendum. Add the following delegations. 1. Wanda Thompson. 2. Gary Wakeham. 3. Bill Manners. 4. Sydney Robertson. 5. Don Bonner. 6. Alan Davidson. 7. Kevin Saunders. Item 7B, Nuisance Property, 21 Halliburton Street. Add delegation Louise Gadd. Item 8B, Purchasing Power Delegation Bylaw. We're updating the synopsis. Item 9A, 2017 Culture and Heritage Grant Recommendations. Add the following delegations. 1. Andrew Homsey, Nanaimo International Jazz Festival Association. 2. Joy Bremner, Mid-Island Métis Nation. Item 9E, remove development permit number DP 1066 at 1406 Bowen Road. And item 9J, bylaw contravention notices, secondary suites. Remove 210 5th Street, illegal secondary suite.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Kep.
Thank you. I have a late delegation request from Mr. Leon Cake on item 8A. The procurement policy update.
8A. Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, can we have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Nothing more. All right. Before we get into the program here, I just want to say, with respect to the purpose of this meeting, this is a business meeting, and I want to read out a statement concerning council meeting decorum. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists. Each councillor brings to the meeting their own individual personalities, attributes, abilities, and values. Each member of council is required to be respectful, not interrupt or disrupt another member of council, staff, or the public when they do not have the floor. Therefore, there will be no cheering, jeering, or other outbursts from the gallery to ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and do so freely without fear of ridicule. The microphone or microphones of anyone that is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit will be cut off. If there are any outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop, and if they do not comply, they will be asked to leave. A recess is another tool that we may use in order to reset the environment of the council chambers. It's our belief that everyone is respectful of these basic considerations. This meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. Thank you very much. So, the first item, motion for the adoption of the minutes. All three?
Excuse me, Mayor McKay. It's come to my attention that a delegation was missed in the minutes, so if we could include Ms. Wanda Thompson's delegation in the December 19th minutes, so adopt the minutes as amended.
Thank you. So, motion for the adoption of the minutes as amended. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Any other errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, number 7A, Event Center, 2017 Non-Election Assent Voting Process, most commonly known as referendum. The purpose is to request that Council appoint the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officers, approve the budget, and recommend that the Chief Election Officer set the date of 2017, March 11, for the Event Centre non-election assent voting process, otherwise known as referendum. And I would ask that the delegations please address that item. So the first delegation we have tonight is Ms. Wanda Thompson. And everyone will be given 5 minutes. And I would ask all the delegations if they would kindly give us their full name or their name and their place of residence, their city of residence.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, fellow citizens. My name is Wanda Thompson, and I am a homeowner at 720 Chestnut in Brecken Hill, a taxpayer and proud to call Nanaimo home. I'm pleased to be here tonight to speak about the proposed referendum on the Event Centre. I made a plea for a referendum when I was here in December, and so I'm encouraged to see it on the agenda now. Of course, I'm asking Council to approve the referendum process tonight. There are many reasons why this referendum is crucial, in fact, a necessary step regarding the proposed publicly funded event centre in WHL Arena, and I'm going to give you just 5. First, you have a democratic obligation to seek the express support of the citizens of Nanaimo. Why? Because not one of you campaigned on this issue in 2014, and not one of you had this in your platforms. This and your record of responsible government so far does not give you the political or moral right to make this decision without the approval of citizens. Second, the so-called consultations on this event centre were based on a proposal prepared by slick out-of-town developers. Developers who build arenas and who we paid to tell us we need a WHL arena. Mr. Mayor, council members, do you really think that the citizens of Nanaimo are that gullible to believe this one-sided sales pitch? It's like going to a car lot and asking the salesperson if you should buy an expensive car. These consultations were an insult to me and the intelligence of taxpayers. Third, this so-called event centre, really just an excuse to build an arena for rich WHL owners, could be the single largest expense ever in the history of Nanaimo. And the $86 million quoted by the developers is only a drop in the bucket. It doesn't include land purchase, infrastructure, remediation, WHL team subsidies. And on top of that, we have to borrow all the money and pay interest on it. You have no right to impose this debilitating financial burden on the city's taxpayers, especially when there are clearly so many other critical areas requiring thoughtful, strategic development and attention in this city. Going ahead without a referendum and the clear support of a majority of taxpayers only serves to reinforce your dismal record of governance of this city. 4, I am tired of hearing that our city needs this and that we have not arrived, or that we are not proud, or that we are not a major city unless we have a WHL arena. Really? Since when did Swift Current, Cranbrook, and Kennewick, Washington become major cities? You know why the consultants said these things? I'll tell you why. They're playing the emotional card because they do not have one solid financial or social benefit that they can demonstrate for Nanaimo. So stop trying to force on us this ill-conceived and rushed proposal to spend hundreds of millions of our tax dollars. You need to provide citizens with neutral, unbiased, factual information about the event centre and stop feeding us this fake news and let us decide through a referendum if we support it. 5, this city has a lot to offer and even more potential. There has been much work done on how to thoughtfully and strategically develop the Southport lands, which seems to have lost your attention. More work needs to be done to consider how best to invest in this city to support and attract businesses and families and build a vibrant, diverse, and prosperous community. This event centre, as it is currently being proposed, is not the solution. And please, can we stop calling 100% taxpayer-funded hockey arena an investment? It's simply a massive direct subsidy to a for-profit commercial enterprise. This is why I'm asking you to approve the referendum process today. As a council, you do not have the political capital to do this, nor has this flawed process come close to presenting the facts or the full picture to us as taxpayers. This kind of reckless spending of tax dollars needs to be brought to the people for a vote in a referendum. Mayor and Council, I feel like I'm here tonight speaking to you as though you are the de facto Yes Committee, not my elected representatives looking out for the best interests of this city. On top of it, while my tax dollars are funding your Yes campaign, I'm left to defend the interests of concerned citizens with no more than my words here tonight. I ask you to do the right thing and approve a referendum and secure the democratic approval of the citizens of this city. You are, after all, ultimately accountable to us. And one final comment, Councillor Kipp, I'm still waiting for your apology. I've had a long time to reflect on this, and I'm not going to give up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions for you. The
Any
next
questions?
speaker is Mr.
Thank you.
Gary Wakeham. And the next one after that will be Mr. Manners. Do we have a motion to receive the delegation, please? Moved by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Good evening, Mr. Wakeham.
My name is Gary Wycombe. I'm a citizen of Nanaimo. I live on Captain Morgan's Boulevard, beautiful downtown Protection Island. The purpose of my presentation is to actually request that you do not hold a referendum. Instead, I would recommend to you that you restart the public process and start with a process that is more inclusive and more transparent and one that involves improved community consultation, with the idea that it can reach a community consensus. It's ironic that some of the literature that was supporting the event center suggested that it would be a location of celebration and that it would be a gathering place for the citizens of Nanaimo. And what I see happening with this referendum is a process that's corrosive, adversarial, and divisive. It's ironic that in the 500 respondents to the telephone survey that was done as part of the background information, when asked what are the benefits, potential benefits of the event center, 3.4% of the respondents suggested a WHL/junior hockey team. 3.4%. That translates into 3,000 residents of Nanaimo, plus or minus 4%, 19 times out of 20. And it is ironic that for such a small percentage of the community, we are investing so much money in investigating the viability of this, when it's clear that there is not support here. And the referendum process then leads us into a situation where we are going to create winners and losers. There's no opportunity here in a referendum to sit down, reach community consensus, come to some kind of a compromise that may make this thing successful. It's either a yes or a no. If you're an opponent or if you're a supporter, there's no room here for some middle ground with a referendum. And if we reflect on the referendum for the conference center, today, 49% of the population has the right to say, or the right to say, I told you so. 51% of the population of the Nanaimo is feeling betrayed. Let's not repeat that process again. Let's restart this and let's have some improved community consultation that involves more than just a 1950s paradigm that says government knows best, we've hired some experts, they know what's happening, and we're just going to, you're just going to have to accept this, that this is the way the future is going to unfold. We know in the 1950s, government knows best, supported by experts, created some horrific results. We're well beyond that now. We can start over and do it properly. In the field of community planning, there are various theories of how you might go about doing community planning, and a lot of it depends on the type of issue that you're dealing with. On complex issues such as this, where there can be varied opinions in the public, there is a process called mutual learning or transactive planning, where the local municipality puts together and facilitates opportunities for different viewpoints in the community to have productive discussion, respectful discussion, and come to some kind of a consensus. I've seen it used for communities to determine how to build bridges through sensitive environmental areas, major highway corridors, landslides in urban areas. What's the best method to repair landslides? Even mundane things such as trying to figure out the traffic signal coordination on thoroughfares. Rather than experts from outside and simply a yes or a no, we're going with this, opportunities for people to get together and discuss it. You can use the process of investigating an event center as a community building exercise, right? Because the event center isn't supposed to be an event center for the sake of an event center. You're doing this to help build community. So why wouldn't you use a process that helps build community? Citizens in this community, you've got some really smart people. The experts don't have the monopoly on brains. You actually have citizens in this community who are just as smart, as well qualified, who can help you, and having them discuss it.
Thank you. Your time's up, sir. Councillor Hong has a question for you.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out some things. I don't know if government knows best or not, but they did give us the powers to govern. It's the community charter that's been given to us. So they did something right, I guess. Otherwise, you could be talking to the province of BC right now. Community opportunities, people building exercise for the community. I think we tried that at the Colliery Dams, didn't we, Jim? So I gotta say, thank you.
Your Worship, may I answer?
I'm not sure there was a question in there, though.
You indicated that Councillor Hong had a question. You can pick up any elementary book in political science and look at the definition of democracy. Government is there to serve the people. 1950s style is the government is there to rule the people. That went out at the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment.
Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Yoakum, do you have a question for the...
It was to represent the people. I think the people decide, like I hear the 1950s comments. I don't think there's ever going to be a 100% of please at any side. And so I will be supporting the referendum, and whether it's 50+1 or whatever the numbers be, that's I think in our system, that's the best we can do with democracy, in my view. Whether it's 1950 or 2016. I'm not here to debate you, but I just want to say I'll be supporting a referendum. And then you say it's to represent the people. Well, that's where the people will decide. If they say no, it's no. If they say yes, it's yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Kipp, followed by Pratt. Councillor Pratt, thank you. Call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Mr. Manners, followed by Sidney Robertson.
Good evening. My name is Bill Manners. For the last 42 years, I've resided in the city of Nanaimo. Before that, I resided in Departure Bay, BC. Mayor and Council, regarding the event center, I must say the process disappoints me so far. It seems rushed, not transparent, biased, and extremely expensive. But based on where we are now, a referendum is our least bad option, and we have to have one. It is clear that the figures in the proposal put forth by BBB are out of reach for our current tax base. Too many event centers rely on WHL hockey teams that cost taxpayers money year after year after year. We had a viable proposal from a private sector to build a multiplex on their own land, and this somehow has disappeared from the conversation. If our city is to continue along the process put forth by council, we do need a referendum in order for the residents to be fully informed of the true cost projections, and the debt this event center will put upon all the taxpayers in this wonderful city. Thank you for allowing me time to speak tonight.
Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Robertson, followed by Mr. Bonner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Sydney Robertson, and I live on Irwin Street in the beautiful South End in Nanaimo. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you about the proposed referendum, as this is an issue which is very important to me. First off, I feel the need to tell you that I'm a bit nervous about speaking here tonight. I'm usually quite comfortable speaking in public, but some delegations on the subject of the event centre have been treated quite rudely, in my opinion, during the question time. A few of you, only a few of you, used the opportunity to ask for more information as a chance to rip holes in the presenter's opinions, and when you ran out of factual arguments, you resorted to bizarre critiques which had no bearing on the presenter's words. So I'm saying right now that I will answer any respectful question you'd like to put to me, but I will simply not respond to rudeness. So it brings us to the proposed referendum. In spite of my misgivings, I'm here tonight because I feel very strongly that we need a referendum, because I feel that some members of the council have not listened to the public up to this point. They've had opportunities. They've had many opportunities. The South Downtown Waterfront Initiative is just one example, a process that took many months, many hours of community time, with a variety of community engagement opportunities. Already told you that the community does not want to see a multiplex, but it's not the answer that some of you wanted to hear, so here we go again. The consultation process so far has been terribly flawed. The written notice which arrived at my home told me that the first 2 open houses had already happened, but I still had time to get to the 3rd. But then most people I talked to about it hadn't received a written notice at all, so I guess I was lucky. The process was just too rushed. I also found the information very biased in favor of an event centre, which is no surprise given that the consultants are in the business of building event centres and were, in my opinion, actually providing us with a massive sales pitch, and a sales pitch that we paid for. The online survey as well, I thought was very biased in favor of an event centre. Especially negligent to me is this implicit notion that an event centre is our only option for development or revitalization, as though it's the only thing that has ever worked for anybody else. The reality is quite the opposite. Most communities seem to lose money by building an event centre. Watching the reactions of some councillors to previous delegations that spoke in opposition to the proposed event centre, I couldn't help but feel that some of you made up your minds before any consultation was started. I don't know how to convey how strongly I urge you to keep your minds open. One councillor I spoke with said he had a dream of providing a legacy to future generations. But when I asked him, if we don't build this event centre, is there anything else that you think could leave a legacy? He had no response. Clearly, he had already made his decision. His mind was closed. He was focusing on one project and one project only. But building this event centre would cost this community far more than the many $1 million estimated. It would also cost us all the other infrastructure and revitalization projects we would not be able to afford because we'd be stuck paying for an event centre. Projects and infrastructure that actually would attract new residents and economic development. Projects like park spaces, streetscape improvements, transit infrastructure, public art, trees. We could do all these things and more at a much lower cost. Projects that have been proven to attract new residents and spur economic development. One of the arguments we've heard is that everyone else has one. Seriously, this has been put forward as a reason to saddle ourselves with enormous debt. Well, as a parent, I never accepted that argument from my children, and I certainly won't accept it from consultants that stand to profit from my gullibility. The process has been flawed. The process has been terribly flawed. And so I urge you to support a referendum. We need this chance to speak, and you need to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Baswick.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Robertson, and the previous delegations. Just out of curiosity, were you making specific reference to me in your example of somebody who doesn't have other options for a legacy?
In that conversation, yes.
Okay, so I would be very happy to share with you. I'd love to see an IMAX in Nanaimo. I'd love to see a Science World in Nanaimo. I'd love to see a mineral pool to replace the outdated Beban pool. I'd love to see the accessibility at the Beban pool for the gymnasium that's upstairs that is hidden. Nobody even knows it's there. I'd like it on ground level at grade. I'd love to see a YMCA, perhaps at the at the Departure Bay Activity Center. Take that thing down, knock it down, and put a YMCA or YWCA or something there. So I have countless examples of things that I would love to see our city have that I think we don't have, that we languish in not having. Should this referendum not proceed? Should it not proceed? I'll be back saying, I'd like to see us have an IMAX. I'd like to see us have a Science World. About 7 or 8 or 9 months ago, a woman came to that same location, and I said, would you like to see a new pool at Beban? Wouldn't you like to see a new pool at Beban when we were talking about the Core Services Review and maybe closing it for 4 weeks? Maybe like a whole bunch of other things in the Core Services Review? I said, because I'd like to replace it.
So are you asking me?
No, well, I'm asking you that question if it was me, because I want everybody to know that it was me, but I have countless examples of things that I would love to see our city invest in for our next generation, for the future of our city, and those people that are living in it and want to have newer opportunities for their families. So I will be back on March 12th if this doesn't proceed, and I can assure you that those 5 things will be on my agenda. Thank you.
May I respond?
I'm not sure there was a question in there.
May I respond anyway?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I'm very glad to hear that. I'm very glad to hear that you are considering other projects. My problem is that we seem to be focused on only a multiplex. My other problem is the vast amount of money we're looking at spending on the multiplex, and I'm not sure how we can get behind other projects when we'll be, if we're in debt for a multiplex. I could get behind you on almost everything on your list. But the one that was made one of the 5 priorities was the event center, a multiplex, and I don't understand why. I don't think it should be our priority, not for our public money.
Thank you. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I don't know if you've been following this or not, but Council went through a session for a strat plan. This was on the strat plan. That's how we got here. So if you ask why we randomly just pulled an event center out of the hat, well, we didn't. We all got together at VIU. We had 52 items on a board. We put dots on all the ones. We eliminated the ones that we weren't interested in focusing on. And this was one of the top 5. So I just wanted to give you, we just didn't randomly out of the say, hey, let's build an event center out of nowhere. The public knew when we selected their items. This is what councils do. We try to look forward to the future. I would love to do all those things Councillor Bestwick said. I would like to see a gondola, a tunnel to Newcastle. I actually would like to see a bridge to Vancouver, because I hate BC ferries. Maybe even to Gabriola. Hope there's no Gabriola there. Not to protection, though. You're safe. So there's a lot of things that we want to do. Again, it comes down to money. When we pick one thing at a time, and if this fails, our next year's strat plan, this is off the list, like Councillor Bestwick says, something else is going to pop up on our top 5 that we're going to focus our money on. And that's how we do things. We would love to do everything, but we can't. And this isn't out of the blue. This was chosen by all of council to investigate this. And we're going to do the best of our ability to investigate this. We've done our investigation, and we are going to bring it to a referendum so the people can decide. It's up to you. You can tell us if you don't want it, that's fine. Next year, we'll pick something different. If you do select this, I can tell you, probably won't have any money next year to pick anything else. We might. We are putting money aside for our capital investments, our capital projects fund. We're not going to gain any money over the first year or two, but over the next couple of years, there should be a healthy reserve in there to do projects. So the next council has some money, not unlike this council, which one of the previous speakers said, is we have no money. We have no money for this. We are going to borrow because there was no reserve. And that's just the facts. We're not trying to sugarcoat it. So just want to clarify that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but again, there was no question. So I'm not really feeling that you're here to ask me questions about my opinion and hear what I'm having to say.
Mm-hmm.
You're wanting me to hear again what you have to say. You have a microphone every week. This was my opportunity to be heard.
Well, I wanted to.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next speaker is Mr. Don Bonner, followed Mr. Alan Davidson. No, I don't see Mr. Bonner at this time. Mr. Davidson.
It looks like Don Bonner isn't here, so I'm Alan Davidson. Live in Departure Bay, Nanaimo. And I want to talk to you about the referendum as well. What I want to talk to you about is what I feel is some of the information that we need leading up to the referendum that at the moment we don't seem to have. First of all, I just want to thank Council for moving ahead with the full referendum. The proposed event centre is going to be a very costly project, the most expensive ever proposed for the city. For comparison purposes, we borrowed $30 million for the convention centre and $22.5 million for the water treatment plant. If we go ahead with the event centre, we will almost certainly be borrowing much more than we did for both the water treatment plant and the convention centre put together. A full referendum is certainly warranted. I want to point out that in the lead up to the referendum, there's a need for the public to have access to unbiased and complete information on what is being proposed. At the moment, we only have a draft version of the Phase 2 study, with many of the component pieces missing. Specifically, I want to briefly touch on the traffic and parking component, the operational business plan, and the more recently completed Ernst & Young review, all of which are currently not available to the public. First of all, the traffic and parking study. I've been asking for a copy of this for quite a while now, and I'm still waiting for it to appear on the city website. I looked again tonight before coming down here, and it still isn't there. I expected this to be available almost a month ago when the Phase 2 consultants made their presentation to the Council. As I understand it, the consultants have identified 1,450 vacant parking spots in the downtown area. So the plan is that there will be no additional parking provided as part of the event center project. When you're planning for crowds of more than 5,000 people at the event center, coupled with potentially overlapping events at the nearby convention center or the Port Theatre, 1,450 parking places doesn't sound like a lot. In addition, these parking places are apparently spread all over town. So I'll be very interested to learn how this is supposed to work in our downtown area. To me, there's a striking similarity developing with what happened at the convention center. Underperformance at the convention center has been attributed to a lack of convenient, quality hotel rooms. In future, underperformance at the event center could just as easily become due to a lack of convenient parking. The operating business plan. I did see the operating plan briefly on the city website. It appeared as part of the draft Phase 2 report. It was marked as confidential, and then it disappeared from the website within a day or two. This is a critical piece of information that we, the taxpayers of Nanaimo, have paid for and need to have access to well before referendum day. It's quite astounding that we paid for a study but apparently aren't being allowed to see it because the person who did the study considers it confidential. One of the important operational questions that must be clarified well before referendum day surrounds the need for ongoing operational subsidies from the taxpayer. Most event centers require annual financial injections from the local municipality to help cover operating costs. From a study carried out by the City of Nanaimo in 2013, across BC, this subsidy typically ranges from $230,000 a year to almost $2 million a year. A Thunder Bay study had similar findings, showing operating subsidies at 11 event centers varying from $300,000 a year to $1.2 million a year. In contrast, our event center is supposed to start making a profit in the third year. We clearly need an explanation or a revised business plan. The Ernst & Young review. So far, the economic impact studies have done a very good job of identifying the benefits that could be attributed to the event center, but haven't bothered detailing what the risks or the hidden costs might be. If the Ernst & Young study is truly an unbiased and thorough assessment, I would expect to see such information in it. If details of risk aren't there from a due diligence point of view, Council should be asking why not. When I asked to see the Ernst & Young review, I was advised that it was being kept in camera for a while. Not only does this review need to be released to the public, but in the lead up to the referendum, the public consultation process needs to be modified to include a public presentation of the Ernst & Young findings, followed by an opportunity of the citizens to ask questions of the experts. At this point, we don't need more public information events showing glitzy pictures of monster truck shows. We need unbiased answers to some pretty basic questions.
Your time is up, sir.
Okay. Well, I would just like to, at the very end, I just want to ask Council, when can I expect to see this information? We've paid money for a Phase 2 report. We've got bits and pieces of it. We've got a draft version of it that hasn't been finalized. We've got reports that are missing. When is this stuff going to be made available?
Is there anyone at the staff level that's prepared to help us with that?
Your Worship, the Phase 2 appendices will be available this week, minus the confidential information that the service providers have given us permission to release.
Thank you. So that would be the traffic and parking study. When do we expect, or do we have a timeline on a business plan? Mr. Memba?
Thank you, Worship. At the time, I think from the timelines that I see here, at the time that the referendum would be called, which I believe would be February 6, all the relevant financial information will be made available for members of the public.
February 6th, you used that date?
That's the date I used, yes.
The date in which?
I said, looking at the timelines that I see, if you pass the February 6th as the date you are recommending that the corporate officer calls for a referendum, at that time we'll make available all the relevant available financial information for members of the public.
Thank you.
What about the Ernst & Young report?
That's part of it.
And that's February the 6th? February the 6th?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the delegation? Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Well, I guess I should ask the question, Mr. Davidson, since the last delegation didn't want to hear me comment. Would you like to hear my comment about parking?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Everybody thinks parking is a huge issue, but if you look next to us, we have hundreds of acres, over 100 acres of Port Authority lands. We haven't even gotten to the discussion to lease land as parking, which Island Ferries were going to do when they were going to put their fast ferries on our property. They were going to go lease property next door for parking. We haven't had the discussion about the CP rail lines and the properties that they're willing to sell for parking. So parking, I think some people make it as a huge issue, but if you look around that area, the potential, even for a developer to buy a chunk of land and make a parkade in there, there's lots of land. So that's number one, Port Drive. I'm not talking about Howard Johnson site.
Can I just ask you that? So what you're telling me is you're going ahead with this and you haven't made any plans for the parking.
No, there is parking, but if we needed more parking, like I said, there is a lot of potential to get into the negotiations. Until we pass referendum,
I mean,
we
the
won't
other
do
question
those.
is, if you're talking about a parkade, who's going to pay to build it?
A private developer, so you can pay $10 to park there like everybody else does.
I doubt that very much. I suspect what's going to happen at the end of the day, we're going to find ourselves talking about building a parkade because there's parking problems downtown. I was just very curiously last week in the Times Colonist, there was an article about parking in downtown Vancouver or Victoria and the problems.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at financing one or more parkades downtown because of the parking problems. We're going to be in that same position. The problem is we should be factoring in that now as a cost of this project, not a year from now when we're going to have to pay it.
Can I tell this gentleman that we actually generate money from our parkades?
The question is...
I just want to verify that So
no, you
parking-
can't tell him, Councillor.
So why aren't we building more parkades all over the place then? Where's the money going to come to build the parkade? We're going to need another $5 or $10 million to build a parkade.
Because you charge money for parkades. This is not going to be free parking. Like, this is, I think...
I have a number of questions for the delegation.
Sounds
If we
good.
could move this along, it's not intended to be a debate. Councillor Pratt.
My question is to staff, not to the delegation.
Okay. Ms. Sammer?
Thank you, Mayor McKay. So last week, staff did a presentation on the public engagement for the next phase, and Mr. Cooper advised that all the unanswered questions and the main themes that came up, including transportation, there'll be public information available on it to address those concerns, and during this next phase, more information will be provided. At this point, we're not able to do that this evening. We have posted the transportation studies for both of the sites, and this is definitely an issue that will be answered along with all the other issues that were raised by this presenter. He definitely identified questions that need to be addressed, and your comments are most welcome. And the next phase, staff will be preparing the engagement materials that will address most of these issues. So that's the next phase.
What I would just encourage council to do is go beyond the providing written information, particularly with the Ernst & Young report, since it is going to be so critical, that there be some sort of a public presentation with an opportunity for people to question the experts. I think everybody has recognized there's a lot of questions that people have, and a lot of them are very basic questions about how much is this going to cost us, and a lot of those sort of things. It's much easier to have a bit of a discussion back and forth with an expert on things like that, rather than try and do it through written communications back and forth.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Fuller.
With regards to parking and a number of other issues that we may not have the total information on, I'm getting mixed messages from the community. I get a message from the community that we're spending way too much money on reports, and then I'm getting messages from the community that we're not spending enough money on reports. The referendum itself, through the no and yes, is going to determine whether we go forward with this or not. And if we determine we're going to go forward with it, then we will get all of those ducks in a row. If we determine we're not going to go forward with it, then I don't want to be spending any more money on reports that we may not need. We will have plenty of time to do reports once it's determined whether we're going to go forward with it or not. So why waste the money now?
My presentation was all about getting the information we've already paid for. We've already paid for all of this stuff.
I totally agree with you,
It's
Alan,
supposed to be
and
in
that's
phase
why
2.
we've mentioned that it will be there. When we do the information sessions for this, all that information will come out. I like your idea about having a presentation with regarding Ernst & Young so that delegations could apply to come to it at a council meeting. That shouldn't be too hard to do. We could do that at a council meeting and have delegations come to speak to it. So, I like that.
Councillor Brennan.
Particularly what Councillor Fuller said was my question. When you're talking about having an information session specifically, say, on the business plan and the Ernst & Young report. Are you visioning this kind of setting? Or are you visioning that kind of setting we had out at Bevan Park where there was a corner set up and the rest of the work is going on out there and then there's this little...
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, what I have in the back of my mind is a large public meeting where 400 or 500 people, if they're interested, can come and listen. And a lot of people may not be prepared to participate or have questions, but they may be very interested in hearing questions and answers.
I agree with you, and I like the idea of having one setting that's dedicated to asking those questions and have an audience there to hear the answers. Thanks.
Thank you. For the delegation? Question for the delegation? Okay. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Yocum and Hong. It was moved by... That's correct. You're next in the queue. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we've got Councillor Pratt with a question for staff.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify with staff, one of the questions that Mr. Davidson posed was around when certain information would be on the website. The answer that came back was that after the referendum has been called on February 6th, it will be available. And I just wanted to clarify that that is just the calling of the referendum. Then there will be a time period where there will be public consultation as well as information on the website. And I'm wondering if Mr. Mima could just confirm that is the case.
So thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Pratt. Last week, Mr. Cooper reported that their webpage is up and running and that Phase 1 report and Phase 2 report and those portions of the appendices that could be released are posted, so that information is there. We'll continue to add to that as we move forward. The point that we discussed in camera, which we can discuss in open, is that when you decide to move into the referendum, there is an obligation on council to provide all of the information that the community needs to make an informed vote. And all of that information will include the findings and recommendations and advice that you receive from the independent firm of Ernst & Young, a national organization that was retained by the city to truth check, to proof, to give us that sober second thought to the reports that were generated by the consultants. So that information of the best case, the worst case, the projected case of the costs of operating the event center and all the different impacts on the city, looking at the ticket sales, looking at the different things, that information will be made available for the public. The 4 public consultation sessions that were proposed by staff, and we've added 2 more to them, so there's going to be 6 located across the city, starting in early February and ending in the first week of March. All of those sessions will be able to have all the different types of questions that remain unanswered, the experts and information on hand necessary so that when the public comes out, they can ask these questions and there'll be responses and information that they need. It is critically important that the information that the city generates is accurate, that it's not ambiguous, that it's not confusing, because the threshold you're meeting is being able to provide the community with the information that they need to make an informed decision. And that can't be done if things are kept from them. That can't be done if it's not clear and precise. And that's why it's taking some time for staff to present and prepare the materials for the next phase of engagement. So to repeat, the webpage is up. Everything that can be posted and everything that can be shared is there. The business case cannot, because we're going to be negotiating with operators to run the event center should that happen. And if you were to put the business case up, that would blow the city's negotiating position. So there's some things that can't be shared. So that's how we're moving forward. And Mr. Cooper will be happy to provide more briefing to council next week if you need that, or at our weekly briefing.
Thank you. Anything additional? No, thank you. So the next speaker is Mr. Kevin Saunders.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kevin Saunders, homeowner and taxpaying citizen of Nanaimo. Over these past few months, there have been great concern amongst the citizens over the funding of a proposed event center. We have already seen quite a large sum spent on the consulting phase of this project with very minimal public input. We have been shown designs and figures by a company who specializes in these venues on our dime before even deciding on a referendum. Given the price tag on this project and its potential burden of the taxpayers of our city, we seem to be rushing to push this through in such a short timeline. Holding a referendum is the best means of finding out whether the citizens of Nanaimo wish to move ahead with this any further in a 100% taxpayer-funded model. I'm pleased to hear that Council is moving ahead on planning a referendum, as this event centre is more of a want rather than a need for our city, which is the big question. Do we want our tax dollars to go towards the construction and operating of an event centre?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions for you, sir.
Thank you.
Motion to receive the delegation.
Sure.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Pratt. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Before we move into the motion, I would just like to say from my standpoint, there's a lot of questions on this very, very expensive project, and it's Council's wish and my wish to drill down as far as we possibly can before we get to referendum, so that we can have as many answers to the questions that you're going to ask. For example, you may have to even get into some more drilling down with respect to construction costs. If you were to give a credible construction company a picture of a building, you're never going to get a price on what it's going to cost to build that, unless you have far more detailed information. Same thing as the budgets. We're still trying to digest this information. We're trying to ask the right questions. We're trying to ask third parties, independent third parties, to please take a look and peer review the work that we've got to date. So there's a lot of questions that still need to be asked, and we continue to invite your participation. I want to make sure that on March the 11th, there's no question unanswered for the community, and that you can make an informed decision and make a decision on whether you do or don't want this project to go ahead. But you need the answers. So thank you. Next is there is a motion on recommendation on the motion on page 26.
Move all three.
Councillor Bestwick to move all three. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ford. Ms. Sammer?
There's an amendment to the to each of the motions. Appoint Ms. Sheila Gurry as the Chief Election Officer for conducting the 2017 non-election assent voting process or referendum, effective February 6, 2017, is the amendment. And the same amendment would go after Ms. Skye Snellgrove and Ms. Lisa Zwarn as the Deputy Chief Election Officers, effective February 6, 2017. And Ms. Gurry isn't here this evening, but if you want a brief presentation on this process, staff is happy to do that. But of course, we can just field questions from council as you go through the debate.
Very much. So the motion has been moved and seconded. Were you chiming in, Ms. Selger? Okay, thank you. So the mover is okay with the amendment, as is the seconder. Okay. Councillor Hong is on the floor.
Great. Thank you. Just through you to staff, what does $130,000 get us? Or what is it for? How does that break down?
So the 130,000 is split into two, actually. First, about $60,000 is for the election itself. So you're running an election, so there's ballot papers, there's rental of machines and all that stuff. That's for that piece. And then the difference is really on staff time. That's the split.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'll certainly support all three of the recommendations. I'm very pleased that we are proceeding to referendum on this this very major project. We've certainly heard from a lot of citizens that they wish to have a voice, a direct voice, in whether or not we proceed with this. And I'd also like to add that I appreciate the words of Ms. Samra in terms of assuring the citizens that we will be providing as much detailed and accurate information, third-party evaluations, and so on, that we can as soon as possible prior to the referendum being held on March 11th. So I look forward to it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I too, I'm going to support moving to a referendum. I've never felt like being part of a de facto yes committee. I've never felt that. I've never made a concrete decision on whether I want it or whether I don't want it, because I get both sides of the discussion. And when people mention things like it being rushed and biased, that also depends on who you're talking to and which side they support. The people that are for it don't think it was rushed or biased. The people against it do think it was rushed and biased. So I'm neither here nor there with it. I've always wanted a referendum on this. When we did the borrowing for the water treatment center, that went through as an alternate approval process. We borrowed $22 million to do something we really didn't need to do. We could have stood up to the province of BC and said, no, we're going to do something different, but we didn't. They went to the alternate approval process. Only 3 people signed the forms against the borrowing. That meant that the rest of the population, voting population, supported that borrowing. This is a full referendum. This is what I want to see. It's what I wanted to see with the conference center. We have to live with the decisions that are made, and hopefully the decision that's made is going to be the right one. When we talk about democracy failing, I've seen that. I've literally seen that happen through Calgary Dams. This is democracy in action. You either support it or you don't. You vote yes or no.
Thank you. I'm about to call a question, but I just wanted to clarify to everyone either in the gallery or at home that the term non-election assent voting is the charter language and Local Government Act language with respect to a referendum, as opposed to another term that we hear called an alternative approval process. This is actually the non-election assent voting, and that is what most of us would know as a referendum. So it's been moved and seconded, all 3 recommendations as amended. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item. Nuisance property at 21 Halliburton Street, and the purpose is to obtain council authorization to have 21 Halliburton Street declared a nuisance property. There is one delegation, Ms. Louise Gadd. One moment, Ms. Gadd. Councillor Hong, did you need to bring something up?
When were you going to do that?
Okay, can we bring that up under other business, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Louise Gadd. I reside and work in the unceded and occupied territories of the Coast Salish people in Vancouver. I'm an accountant and I'm employed by a group of companies which include 0810867 BC Limited and Altera Property Group. The numbered company owns the properties located at 17 and 21 Halliburton Street, and Altera Property developed and built the Vivo building at 555 Franklin Street, and we have 11 rental units there. We purchased the properties on Halliburton in late 2008, and we took over some existing tenancies on January 1st, 2009. Since then, anytime we've been notified of issues with the property, we've made efforts to address those, including trying to ensure that the tenants would comply. Unfortunately, our efforts have had short-term effect only, as the tenants at 21 Halliburton continued to be a problem. Attempts to deal with the tenancy through the Residential Tenancy Office have been unsuccessful until very recently. Of the more than a dozen rental units we own in Nanaimo, this is the only one that has been problematic. In February of 2016, when we became aware of the fact that there had been an incredibly high number of emergency calls in 2015, we increased our efforts and served notice on the tenants, informing them that the issues of junk accumulation and noise and disturbance complaints were material terms of their tenancy, and if they did not cease, that we would take steps to end the tenancy. We were in contact with Bylaw Services and the RCMP to obtain as much information as possible and to indicate our willingness to deal with these issues. There were 2 follow-up notices served on the tenants in May and June of 2016. And since July, we've been conducting monthly inspections of the property with the assistance of Widston Property Group. In early July of 2016, I spoke again with Barry Hornby in the Bylaws Office, who put me in contact with Bill Bain of the RCMP. When I spoke with Constable Bain on June 20th, he indicated that there had only been 3 police calls so far in 2016. We heard nothing more from the city or the police until late December, even though, as we ultimately discovered, there were 13 additional phone calls to emergency services for the balance of 2016. So on December 20th, we were notified by the city that the property was up for consideration as a nuisance property. Accompanying that information was a report from the RCMP detailing many items of grave concern. The report stated that there had been a total of 16 emergency calls in 2016, which was only slightly down from the previous year, including a very serious assault in November. Based on that information, we immediately served the tenants with a 1-month notice to end tenancy with cause. We applied for and were granted an emergency hearing at the Residential Tenancy Office, which was held via teleconference on January 11th, and we requested that the arbitrator issue us an order of possession so that we would have the ability to take the legal steps to remove the tenant should they fail to move out. The arbitrator upheld the notice to end tenancy and has issued us an order of possession which is dated for the 31st of January 2017 at 1 p.m. This order of possession has been served on the tenants as of Friday, January 13th. We will be following through to have the tenants removed, and then we will take all necessary steps to secure the property and ensure no further incursions by anyone. We will remediate the unit and the lot, and we will manage any potential future tenancies through the services of a local professional property manager. We respectfully submit that when given the opportunity, we have acted promptly in this matter. If we had known in July 2016 or at any point thereafter that the situation had worsened, we would have acted immediately at that point as we did when we were notified in December. We fully expect that the issues will end with the eviction of the problematic tenants, so we ask that you do not at this time deem this property a nuisance under the Act. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fuller, questions for the delegation?
Yep. How many tenants are in the building?
We have 2 listed on the tenancy agreement.
So it's only 2 tenants, and both of them have received the eviction notice?
Both of them have been served with the eviction notice, and both of them participated by teleconference in the arbitration on January 11th, which ended with us.
And the eviction is for the 31st of this month?
Yes. Yeah. We had served the notice in December when we received the information.
Yeah.
It's a 1-month notice to end tenancy.
Yeah.
Rather than wait until the process, until the date, we took the steps of going right to residential tenancy, asking them for an emergency hearing, and asking for an order of possession, which we received.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the process, and I'm you know, I think what you've done is quite adequate, and it would be interesting to see what happens on the 31st, whether they leave or not.
We don't expect that they will leave right away, but the process of obtaining a writ of possession with that order only takes a couple of days, so we've already contacted the bailiff service should we need that service.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I wish to commend you on the thoroughness of what you've done and bringing forward to us. Would you agree that the property is a nuisance property today?
Yes.
Thank you. And you indicated in the previous question to Councillor Fuller that you don't anticipate the tenants to depart on January 31st.
We don't expect they will leave at 1 p.m. as they have been instructed by the order of possession. The process at that point, should they not leave by 1 p.m., is that we can take the order of possession to the Supreme Court and within a number of days have that turned into a writ of possession, which is then a document that the bailiffs can take to the property and physically remove the tenants and their belongings.
Thank you for that response. I think my future questions will be to our staff, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller.
How long would it take if you get the writ of possession? How long would it then take to have those tenants removed?
My understanding is it takes just a few days to get that document, and once the bailiffs have it, they can serve it immediately.
So you would be looking at possibly as late as the middle of February to have them
I would hope
removed?
it wouldn't even take that long. I would hope that it would take place within a week.
Well, I'm just trying to think of a way that we could, rather than put the nuisance abatement cost recovery thing on now, that in the event that the tenants aren't out of there by a certain date in February, that we would put it on at that time as opposed to right now. Because chances are, if we put this on, the RCMP may be called to the property in the next few weeks, in which case they would get billed for it, even though they're doing everything they can to get the tenants out of there. So if we were to hold off until the middle of February or something like that, or the first week of February, I don't know what the date would be, but I'd gladly make that motion if someone could give me the language for it.
Okay, we're going to have to. Councillor Bestwick.
I was just going to move to accept the delegation, but if there's other speakers.
Councillor Kipp.
Just one question. How long have the people lived in the building now that you're evicting?
We took over the tenancy January 1st, 2009. They were already tenants at that point.
So they've been there.
I understand they've been there since about 2006.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions for you, ma'am. Motion to receive. Thank you very much for your delegation. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, do we have questions for staff? Councillor Fuller.
Well, I'd like to propose an alternate recommendation with a specific date added to it for the implementation of the nuisance property designation to say, I believe they're looking at the 31st of January, and they would like to have them out and could get that writ of possession. So I would say within, at the latest, the 15th of February as a date that would trigger the nuisance abatement cost recovery bylaw. So I don't know how to phrase that as a motion. I would like to make a motion I'd like to make a motion to declare the property a nuisance property pursuant to the Nuisance Abatement and Cost Recovery Bylaw 2003, number 5645, as of February the 15th, provided nothing has happened before then and the tenants are still there, something like that. I don't know. I'm making it too complicated. I always do that. So I just, Well, yeah, we could defer it too. Thanks, Jerry.
Can I make a suggestion? Subject to, okay.
Please.
Subject to the removal of the existing tenants from 21 Halliburton Street by February 15th, that council declare, and so on and so on and so on.
That works.
Does that work?
Yeah. Subject to.
Everybody okay with that?
But we probably don't need to do that.
Well, I think that's not clear to me. If I could have that. That sounds like if they're not out, that we would, or that when they're out, we'll do it?
No.
When they're out, we won't do it?
Yes.
If they're not out, we declare it a nuisance? Is that?
Yes.
Just past Valentine's
Okay,
Day.
so, Councillor Hong. Come back to Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. Just a question through to staff. What does this mean? So the definition of a nuisance property. So is there a trigger once we declare this? A couple of questions. Like, so say we get a phone call. We declare this as a nuisance property. We get one phone call throughout the year.
Your Worship, in order to declare a property nuisance property, there has to be a proven track record, for lack of better terminology, that emergency services, whether it be fire, ambulance, well, not ambulance because medical calls don't trigger nuisance calls, but RCMP bylaw to some extent. Once we start having a established pattern of calls to any particular residence, that will then put it on our watch list with our nuisance property meetings, and from that, if the behavior hasn't been modified, then what will happen is we'll do a file review such as the RCMP has done here. I have to commend the people that came in. It seems like they are doing everything right. But I would bring up that they, of course, have owned this place since 2009. There's been numerous nuisance calls, gathered up 60 or 89 operational files since 2007. I don't have it broken off to 2009. Now that it's come before you to be designated a nuisance property, that we're getting the action that we wanted probably back in 2007 or 2008 or 2009. There's no penalty if you do what we're asking.
Okay.
There's no penalty unless nuisance activity continues. So if these people are going to be removed, then there would be no penalty. After 3 to 4 months, if there is no further activity, we would then undesignate it as a nuisance property. So this is put in place to make sure that the steps that we want to make sure that it doesn't continue as a nuisance property are taken.
Okay.
Answer what you were looking for?
Well, just after we declare this as a nuisance property, if they get one phone call, then do we build them? That was my question, is when...
Yes. Once it's declared a nuisance property, then they would be billed for each and every nuisance call that comes in after that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Davidson, for that information. And I also appreciate the information from the landlords. My original thought would be to suggest deferring this for 1 month. And if nothing has changed at this location, then this can come before us again, and we can take action at that time. So if I was to make a motion, it would be to defer this for 1 month. I'm not sure what the state of Councillor Fuller's motion is.
Well, yours is essentially the same as what I was asking, but far clearer. So
on the deferral for until February 15th, is that what you're suggesting, or for 1 month?
1 month from now.
Date for 1 month. Is there a seconder? Councillor Fuller, thank you. It's been moved and seconded on the deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? As I understand. Okay. So, yes.
Davidson. I would like to know whether the nuisance property designation is intended to target the particular tenants in the location, or is it instead intended to encourage the landlord to make the tenants behave so that if it is in order to encourage the landlord to take some action, then a second set of tenants could come in on the 15th, and without the landlord being, having a very studious eye on this, the behavior could continue because the landlord hasn't tried to institute any rules or use the Residential Tenancy Act in different ways. I need that because it appears to me that a deferral would only allow additional time to get new tenants in who continue to be using the emergency services that we have.
The nuisance property procedure is to encourage the landlords or the owners to manage their tenants, not necessarily change tenants, but manage the tenants so that the nuisance issues are abated. So the tenants don't, unless they're fined for particular noise, nuisance, whatever violations at the time, it's the owners of the property that would receive the bills.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you. So we've got like a full board. We've got a full board here right now. Let's call the question on the deferral. Okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Bestwick opposed. Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion carries. The item is deferred. Next item.
Oh, can we still talk about it?
No.
No, it's over. Next item, Section 74D, Community Charter, 432 Howard Avenue. The purpose is to obtain council authorization to enforce the provisions of the Community Charter related to contaminated soil deposited at the property at 432 Howard Avenue. The recommendation is that council, pursuant to Section 74D of the Community Charter, declare the contaminated soil a nuisance and order the owners of 432 Howard Avenue to remove the soil within 30 days. Is there a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Bestwick?
Well, I'll move it just to get it on the floor.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pratt.
Excuse me, I own that property.
So, did we have a delegation? So you've not signed up for as a delegation? What's council's pleasure? Do you wish to hear the delegation?
Yes.
Okay. By consent. Thank you.
Your Honor, I got this soil from 540 Franklin Avenue. Nobody told me there was anything wrong with this, and put on there, and then I got this letter the other day from Mr. Clausen, and as your wife realized, the weather's been terrible. I haven't been able to move any of this stuff because the weather's been so bad. I would like to be given a little time so that, as the weather improves, so I can get that soil out of there.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt for the delegation.
Yes. I am looking at the information that we've received, and it was ordered back after October 3rd meeting, it was ordered that it be removed. Did you not receive anything to remove it at that time? Pardon me?
I did not know about that. I found out about it on November sometime when I was at council speaking to the city about something else. And that's when I was told about it, I got the letter delivered immediately on December.
So you did receive notice in November?
No, I never did. I got notice in December.
You got notice in December by mail, and you had not received anything?
I got it handed to me.
Okay.
I guess it was being delivered to the house, and I don't know.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify when you actually received the first notice. So this is the one and only notice that you received?
When I got on December 2nd.
December the 2nd? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Sir, where do you intend to take the soil to? Or who do you intend to have remove the soil?
Well, I've talked to some people, and they say, well, it's a terrible time of the year. It's most of it's topsoil that's going to make a heck of a mess. I think we need drier time.
Okay, so I understand that.
It's not contaminated per se that
No.
it can't stay in the city. It just can't stay in the city.
Okay, so I understand that. Where do you intend to take the contaminated soil to, and when do you intend to do it?
Well, whoever will hire will figure out a place to put it. And I'm hoping they'll be able to find a place to put it. I've spoken to people that say they can get rid of it.
So just to follow up, please, have you made any inquiries to people that are in the business that deal with contaminated soils and the costs associated with doing that? Can you share that with me so I have a greater comfort zone?
I have been told it'd be between $8,000 and $10,000 to get rid of it.
And how long do you need to do that? Are you prepared to do that when?
We need drier times. I mean, this is the worst time of the year to move topsoil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Can I be advised by the staff, what is the process for this? This is a process that we follow? Will we follow the same process when we remove hazardous material?
Your Worship, in this case with the hazardous material, when we gathered our estimates, it was to be disposed of at a proper site. That's one of the reasons that we're back here in front of you tonight, because of the costs involved. We did talk to our lawyers after you gave us your order back in October to have the site originally cleaned up. Mr. Rapton is correct, and it was about $8,000 to have the dirt removed from the site. We were given costs of up to $40,000 tipping fees. That would be, we would have to get provincial permits now because it has been identified as contaminated soil. So it's not something we can just take down the road and dump into the convenient ditch to fill it up. It is contaminated for residential properties. It may not be contaminated for commercially zoned, industrial zoned, or the landfill. I believe that's where we're going to be taking this material, is to the landfill. This was precipitated back in June. We had an unsightly property file on this. Council ordered it cleaned up. Between the cleanup order of council and us going to get the estimates, the dirt appeared and covered most of the material. So it was necessary at that time to get the dirt removed so that we could get at the original material. Since that time, as you can see, there's been more material put on the site, whether that's from people now just getting rid of material or being placed there by the owner. It's there. So we have it's a mixed fill. It's got wood waste, it's got other waste scattered through it, half buried, littering the site. And this has been dragging on for June now. It's the neighbors are not overly impressed. His fence is being jeopardized by the amount of dirt that's pushing against it in this case. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Apologize for speaking twice. If it wasn't contaminated, what would you be doing with it? Because it appears as though that there's too much soil there for this landscape, for the groundscape.
Well, I was going to fill it in because my yard was getting bogged down all the time with water, so I was just going to spread it through the whole yard. It's a fairly big yard.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question for staff is, to Councillor Kipp's question, is there the possibility for soil mixing so that the gentleman wouldn't have to remove it? Because I understand that there is a process referred to as soil mixing to mitigate the contamination in the soil that renders it non-contaminated.
Fowler.
Councillor Bestwick, a couple of things. One, the contaminated site regulations for the province are quite clear about what contaminants, once they're exceeded, then they are considered to be waste under that act, and they have to be sent to an approved facility. So if it was not contaminated, you could give it to someone who wanted clean fill or deposit it in a standard landfill. but when it exceeds the contaminated site regulations for the province, which I understand that has done, then it has to go to an approved site. That's the difference in cost, and yes, it's significant. There is also a concern about leaching, because if there is garbage on the site, which I understand there is, and contaminated soil, there is a risk to the city for allowing that leaching to contain. I mean, principally it's with the owner, but we also have a concern about leaching to neighboring sites, which you can see actually are quite exposed from the depth of the material. Thirdly, the removal is usually done on the amount of truckloads that are required to remove it, and not so much on weight. So if it is this time of year and it's wet, it's simply a requirement for backhoes or front hose to come in and load the trucks up and remove them. So the time of year, while it might be a bit wetter and a bit colder, they still can be removed quite easily from this circumstance and this time of year. Your Worship?
Thank you very much. Don't go too far, sir. Can anybody tell me, how did contaminated soil leave the Franklin Street address and end up on your property?
Well, that's what I'd like to know, sir. I was told I could have the free soil from Franklin, so I thought I'd take it. You know, nobody told me it was contaminated. Of course, I would never take it if I knew it was contaminated. I was never told it was contaminated. I would have never taken it otherwise.
So this
like
leads,
they were just removing
if you could just hold there, sir. This leads me to the question, how did it leave Franklin Street without some sort of permit? Without us having knowledge of where it was going?
My understanding, Your Worship, when it left Franklin Street, it had not been tested and was therefore, it wasn't known that it had the tin, lead, and zinc levels that were of such a measurement that it became contaminated, was then declared contaminated. What it was during the focus of our investigation when we were getting our estimates from the contractors brought it to our attention that it was their studied opinion that they thought, I think, that there was a petroleum contamination, because I don't know how anybody would be able to tell if there's lead or zinc or other heavy metal in the soil, but we did have that test done then for our own purposes so that we knew what we were dealing with, and it did come back as contaminated. So is the soil on the property, the soil that was brought in is certainly contaminated. We haven't gone down to see what the natural soil is there, and we haven't gone back to where the soil came from, somewhere on Franklin Street, but we don't have an address.
Ouch. Thank you. Councillor
Hong. Thank you. First, I guess through the staff, I bet time frame looking at this, there's only one project that's being built on Franklin right now, and that's across from 555 Franklin Street, which is right behind the Music Conservatory, next to the train tracks, and that empty lot. It's the only development that's happened in Franklin last year. So I can guarantee that's where it is, where the 9-unit small townhouse that we approved is going in. So that's where the dirt's coming from. But my question to you, sir, is why do you need more time? Because you can't remove this yourself. You're going to have to hire somebody. They're not going to charge you any less money when the weather's better. From what our staff are saying, it's charged by truckload. So whether you do it now, which you might get a cheaper price because it is winter and it's not like they're really busy working, as opposed to waiting when the weather is better. So why do you need an extension? Like, can you tell us and justify why you need more time to remove this? Because there's no way we're going to let you remove this or your buddies with a truck and a backhoe, because this can't happen.
It's because it'll be just one big mud pit now. Because it is soil. It's basically almost topsoil. So it'll be just one big mud pit to just move anything out there.
It's frozen right now. It's less than anything but mud. It's a perfect time to remove it when it's all frozen. There's no mud. We're not going to let you do this by yourself.
No, I know that.
So a professional is going to come and do it, and if you got a price for it, which you given to us, I'm sure you didn't dictate or they didn't tell you that, hey, we had to do this within this time during these certain months when the weather is ideal, because that doesn't make any sense on why they would stipulate that. When you call them, they expect you to get the soil removed at the time that you called. So I just like to know why you need more time. I have no problem giving you more time if you tell us why you need more time, but that doesn't make any sense.
Because it is going to be one big mud pit if they try to move it down.
But is that your opinion or is that the contractor's opinion?
That's their opinion.
And I'd like that to verify through staff if that's the case.
We would have contractors that would be able to come in there with after the 30 days is expired if that's council's wishes.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I'm just curious as to why we would even, I'm curious as to why we would even debate more time, because he's already had 3 months to do it. We gave him 3 months. This was ordered back in October 3rd. So we're actually getting on 3.5 months later. And now we want to add on to that? I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. In regards to, you mentioned, of course, I totally concur. If you known it was contaminated, you never have accepted the soil, sir. Is there a way you could go back, whoever you got this? Sorry?
I didn't hear you, sir.
Oh, sorry. I totally respect when you stated you would not have even accepted the soil if you known it was contaminated. Absolutely. Is there a way you could go back to whoever you purchased and then?
They won't do it.
Well, then that's when you could talk to staff, because this is sort of illegal. So staff, whoever sold this to you, should be held accountable, because they're putting you in a really hard place. So I'm not going to tell you how to live or what you should do, but I would recommend you relay, because then if it's a development there that's happening, they should be accountable to putting you in this really hard place. Just want to share that with my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fowler. Don't do that.
Sorry. My apologies. The issue that we had asked, there is building material on there, which contains gyprock, which is leachable in water. So there is some leachate risk to the site. Tin and zinc are not that leachable. Lead is, that's in there. So just so you have a risk assessment of what's in there. So there is some leachate risk that is within there. And in terms of legal recourse, it depends very much on what the owner chose to accept and the contract under which he chose to accept it. And he does, as a private landowner, have recourse through the courts for that, depending on those circumstances, which we are not a party to.
Thank you very much. I see no further questions for you, sir. Can we have a motion to receive the delegation, please? Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. There is a motion on the floor, and the question, of course, is that Council, pursuant to Section 74D of the Community Charter, declare the contaminated soil a nuisance and order the owners of 432 Howard Avenue to remove the soil within 30 days. It's been moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Kipp opposed. Motion passes. Now, motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. You have 30 days, sir. Next item, the procurement policy update. And the purpose is to present Council a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee regarding an updated procurement policy. And there's a recommendation on page 30.
It's a delegation, Mr. Cake.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leon Cake.
Thank you. Leon Cake, 936. I've been here since 2010 talking about purchasing policies in the city, so I'm just going to speak on what you're going to be trying to pass tonight, or will pass. I'm just looking at your agenda here on page 31, and I don't know whether he can follow that on page 31, if you can follow it in your packages. But if you look at item 4 and 5, and this isn't, I'm not criticizing here, I'm just trying to point out things that help us as vendors and suppliers to the city in getting involved in a process so that we don't have to come here after maybe a process gets approved. If you look at 4 and 5, it talks about having a vendor open house. So tonight you're going to look at passing a policy, and then you're going to look at having an open house, talk about your policy. So I kind of see that a little bit backwards. We don't get any input into it other than standing here tonight and addressing some of the things in this policy that I'd like to just bring reference to. Page 31, under 1.7, the competitive bid process. If you read that process, it's all fair and transparent, but nowhere do I see that the bids, depending on what they are, will be open in the public. Everything is there, but the bids will be open in the public. So when I see fairness and transparency and the word evaluate, evaluate to me is after you open my bid in public and I know what everybody else bid. So it's a fair, transparent process. If the bids are received, i.e. an RFP, that information is behind closed doors. Anything can happen after that, which I'm quite aware of that. So I don't know how this is going to be looked at for maybe some comments that I'm making and maybe some changes, but I'm hoping that, what I'm trying to say here is 43 years of being in the purchasing business of supply. If we go to page 34, under 1.19, under the acronym RFX, I have a real problem when we get into those processes, because I know they're a good process to put out a package looking for what you want, and I'll use that term, looking for what you want. It's not a process where you're giving everyone an opportunity to maybe, present what they have. If your minds are already made up in your RFP, there's language like, I'll use the example, the backhoe reach must have a reach of 18 feet. Well, mine is 17.5. Well, that would eliminate me because someone wants a backhoe reach of 18 feet. So the RFP process, to me, leaves the language that it can be behind closed doors again, whereas if it's a public opening, everyone knows the prices that were asked for. They have to bid competitively on what you asked for. So that if they want to make a modification to their equipment to be able to bid and see the price in public, then they have to do that. Go to page 35. Under 3.3, under organization, on the bottom there, where it talks about the city encouraged employees and volunteers to conduct purchasing through a consolidated group purchasing based process, I just like to see that anybody who's involved in that process has a valid business license first, because what can happen with that process, I could be in India and I could bid your manhole frames and covers because you made an open process for an RFP to go out and you looked at a group buy. So that could come from a foreign person going on the website and seeing under BC bid that there's an opportunity here to supply something to the city in a massive buy. It just needs a little bit of house cleaning to me. We go to page 36. I like the words we're using. Under item 3.42, we use the word fair, open, transparent in regards to the practices we have. But then again, like I say, I like to see somewhere in this terminology, many times, an open bid process with a closing of a time and the ability to see the prices for what was being asked for. I call them annual tenders. Tenders that have a 1-year term or a 2-year term, not a 5-year term, as I spent 7 years trying to get that not to be a 5-year term in the city, in which we've now gone back to annual tenders. And just so you know, Council, it's working wonderful. We're all sharing some business in the city. Sherritt's, EMCO, 4-Star, we're all getting a piece of the city's business, which is really nice. If we go to page 38, again, request for proposals. We look at the RFP process comes up quite a bit as an example. Again, if we can look at that process to look at and maybe have in these terminologies that there be an open bid process. I don't like when I see under 4, an agreement is negotiated with the vendor receiving the highest evaluated score for qualifications. I'm not a fan of the point system because I can give you an example of a Corex contract where a point system was used in 2010 that was flawed. So I'm not a fan of the point system. I'm a fan of the open bid process, the language that you want in the product that you want to receive. You make it quite clear, and we all bid on that product. We don't have it looked at after it's closed. On page 40, I don't quite understand that one, and maybe I can get some clarification at the very top, number 7. Where the project is highly sensitive or confidential and broadcasting it via open competition is not appropriate. What does that mean? Is that like you want to negotiate with somebody and not put that out for tender? Victor, can you? Or so I just ask questions and you can come back with answers? Okay. I just want to know because I'm trying to see if there's ways to maybe, I'm not saying it's not totally perfect, but try to make it a little bit tweaked. On the very top of page 40, where it says the project is highly sensitive or confidential and broadcasting it via open competition is not appropriate. Okay. Nobody knows what's going on, and if you have that in your policy, what is that about? Who has the right to go and say, hey, we need to negotiate this because I don't want to go up there and broadcast it because I want to get this product or I want to get this service? I don't think that is transparent when we use that word lots. Page 40, 41, where you say here in regards to, I'm just finding out the code, where it talks about the vendor being, you evaluating the vendor for poor service. I just want to make sure in there I can see where the supplier is given a warning in writing so that he has a chance to be notified that he's not doing a good service, rather than where it says here that you're going to put it in a file, contract file by means of a vendor performance evaluation form. So you're going to take my evaluation and put it in a form when I don't know I'm not doing a good job. Maybe I'm doing the best I can. Maybe there's issues with the city ordering too late, in time for projects to get the material. So all of a sudden there's a file being created with information going in against a vendor who doesn't even know that all of a sudden somebody says, we're not dealing with it anymore, we've had nothing but problems. He's got no defense. Item 43, under non-compliance, where it talks about non-compliance in accordance with the city's whistleblower policy. So if someone doesn't do something, right, and there's a whistleblower policy here, and someone comes and tells management this employee is doing something that's totally illegal and anything that goes along that lines, what happens then? There's nothing in there to really say what the city will do about that. It just says, it's expected to report it. So I report it. What happens? We just build a file of all this information. If someone's saying, don't worry, we've got that file, we have that information. I think there's nothing that says consequence. So that if I knew that I was doing something wrong, that I wasn't going to be sitting there doing it wrong forever because every time I did something wrong, it just got put into a file in regards to my name. Page 44, item 14. The reason why I bring this item up is because where it says for employees of the city and their immediate families that could result in a perceived conflict of interest unless that conflict has been disclosed, acknowledged, and approved by the chief CEO. Just for my business, I'm supplying in kind to the Stevie Smith Bike Park through the city. We have conversations and emails on my material I'm getting material orders to supply in kind. So do I need to report that to the city manager that I have conversations with a person is Dana Butcher? Our in-kind material, he sends me a list for which we're taking to that site. Do I need to identify that as a communication so that someone doesn't say, Leon's taking stuff and Dana Butcher's getting all this material down there. I don't know what's going on. So do we need to, anytime we do an in-kind situation where there's an employee involved in maybe ordering parts and pieces who's acting on behalf of the people that they're building in the case of the Stevie Smith Bike Park. Do I need to worry about that? Because I don't want to have that come up later after I supply $50,000 of in-kind pipe material, everything else. So reading that, am I reading it right that I should tell you, or am I reading it right you just put it there and I don't need to worry about it? Okay. Page 45, disposal of excess goods, except land. I just want to bring this to the city's attention. You have on your city website called Surplus. You have your city website called Surplus. I never seen anything on that site. When I read this, the methods of disposal of excess goods shall be whatever the method is to determine most beneficial for the city and the appropriate goods to be disposed of. I'll give you an example of that. There was a time when there was a prawn puller, a prawn trap and a prawn puller, a $600 item, because I guess the city has recoverable items from the RCMP, and they go to the restore. Why would those not go on that surplus site and give an opportunity to a taxpayer to buy that product, or buy that surplus concrete pipe, or buy that surplus pickup truck? Nothing is ever on the surplus site. And this line here says, if I'm a city manager, I'm just using an example, and my friend needs a pickup truck, oh, well, I won't put that on the city site, and I'll see if he wants to buy it for $1,200, because it's $1,200. It should be on the site so it's identifiable for the city to be able to see what surplus we have that we want to sell off because it's no longer usable.
Got to get you to wrap up, sir. Your time's up.
Yep, I will. And the last but not least is 54, and I like page 54. It's under your bylaw that you're looking at. Has a bunch of good language in there. The language I like is that after 7 years trying to get a meter approved, hopefully this is going to be a new direction of where the city's going on dealing with vendors on their products. And that's all I have to say. And hopefully that I will send this tomorrow to Victor, and we had some value.
Thank you. Don't go away. Councillor Yoakum, questions for the delegation?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Cake, thank you again for the years coming forward, and I was enjoyed hearing you speak. In regards to the core review, which this item is why this has come forward to improve it. In your years on this subject, do you see it as positive and a step in the right direction?
Oh yeah, I just wish the open house, I wish the open house was first, because then I could have sat with Victor and beat him on the head and got some of the points across that prior to coming here and having to stand here and address it. I'd rather sit and but it's a good process. It's only a 3-year deal. So in the process of having vendors, open houses, communicating with learning and everything else, it's only 3 years until you make a change.
So just to wrap up, thank you. I just wanted to hear that for the fact we read it in the core review. We're implementing some suggestions from the core review, and a step in the right. If there may be gaps, but I want to make sure we're ensuring we're going in the right direction.
No, it's brilliant.
Thank you.
That's where I'm at with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't go away.
Oh,
Councillor
sorry.
Kippen Fuller, do you have questions
No
for the
questions
delegation?
for the delegation.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Can we have a motion to receive the delegation? Thank you, sir.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Yoakum. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Councillor Kipp.
Well, thank you very much. I'm having real problems supporting anything to do with purchasing. After, since 2008 and onward, I've had concerns with our purchasing.
Can I just stop you there for a second, Councillor Kipp? Can we get the motion or the recommendation on the floor for debate, please?
Okay, let somebody else do it.
Somebody want to bring this on the floor for debate? Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. From the Corex contract, I've got information that says wasn't evaluated on the same basis, and so what should we do? Well, we should take some stuff out of their process so that Corex looks good. It's a tough one for me. I've asked questions, never got a response back. The Colliery Dam, the first $700,000 process to tear the dams out with no steel, all big seismic. Then $1.2 million to say, no, that report's not bad. Then the $8,000 a day purchasing for the sole source purchasing on the colliery. The Zambonis, the electric and the conversions. The disposable of the bike that Councillor Bestwick and I know of. The integrity contract that was let for $20,000 in money put aside. The Roper investigation. I've been called to task because of my questions of purchasing. And I'm really disappointed because I don't see the stuff in it. And when I see this valuation on page 50 about the valuation, that's the concern to me. When staff can make up a proposal that they want and subjectively remove things in that. Nothing in here guarantees me that this won't happen still. And I've asked staff to sit down with me and do this. And I don't know if they're going to one day here, because I have some real concerns with our water audit, with things that go on with this. The sole sourcing proof, the exclusion for people, the authority to issue things. I mean, on the Colliery Dam, I showed staff 3 split invoices from right around my birthday. And it never got dealt with. So I'm really concerned. And I have seen a lot of stuff come forward in the last year and a half with better recommendations, with better ability to audit, with better ability to report. But I don't like what I've seen under my freedom of information. So I will not support this motion that's on the floor today. And I will request that staff sits down with me very soon and deals with my issues, because I'm not moving forward until I get these issues dealt with. And I'll hold this council up. It'll put us at risk, but I'm going to do it. I'm tired of getting this type of response and waiting 6 and 7 years to get the real information. And it's not this staff, it's the previous staff I'm still mad at. And remember, when I go and check these things out and find out, what do I get back? I get back investigations looking at me for interfering with the corporation, and I'm disgusted by that. So people want my apology, me to apologize for people here? Not going to happen. So I am totally opposed to how this process is updated. I'm totally opposed with our approval products. I'm totally opposed with the delegation of powers and bylaws right now. I'm sorry to say that. I hope I don't offend the staff too much. I hope they don't walk out on me. But I've asked for so long for this stuff, and I just get put off. Mr. Cake asked, I think back in October, to sit down. Was told within 5 days staff would get a hold of him. He hasn't been contacted. So, and then what's told? Sue. Oh, Sue. And what happened? Back in 1996 with the dirt pile in Uplands, I helped put a motion forward to say that anybody we're working with, anybody the city's working with, that's this law in here where we won't deal with them. Well, what's happened now is everybody's afraid to even bring up the mistakes or the errors that have been done. They're afraid to get persecuted. They're afraid to get dragged through the mud like Mr. Cake, my friend of special interest. And I'm tired of it, really tired. In fact, it's affecting my health. Can't move forward. We're not going to move forward until these things get dealt with. So thank you for listening to my rant.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I think I'm even more confused than I usually am. I'm looking at the staff report, and it talks about redline documents and such, and then it goes, given that the proposed policy update amounts to a complete redo, it's impossible to provide a redline copy. It says we're getting one, then it says we aren't getting one. That's on page 30. So, am I to understand that pages 32 to 47 are the redone policy?
Mr. Mayor.
So, thank you, Your Worship. If I can walk council through this. So, on December 8, at the Finance and Audit Committee, you received this draft policy. So, at the time, I did say that it was a total redo of the original. And so I attached the older one for reference. Now, my reference now when I'm saying there's a red line, there's basically one spot, which is a change between the December 8th policy that you saw and what you're seeing today. So pages 32 to 47, yes, is the new policy. Okay. The changes that have happened since you saw this policy on December 8 is on page 38, item number 4, 5.3.1, part 4. That's the only change that has happened since the December 8 conversation. If I may, Your Worship, address some of the comments, I think that will kind of guide the conversations going forward. So, there is a chicken and egg issue here from a governance and process perspective. We did debate about at what point do we bring in vendors and have the conversation. And we determined that it is best to address the governance piece first, which is the policy piece, because it tells us where council stands from a policy perspective on what needs to be done. Then we can talk about how that needs to be done. And that's the process. That's when we'll involve our vendors in going forward. I understand even from the Finance and Audit Committee that there is some past practices, there is some legacy issues that are still hanging out there, which I can't speak to, but I can speak to what's different. So what's different here is you have a clear mandate given to the city manager through the policy perspective. What's different is that the city manager has committed to you that there is going to be compliance monitoring and they will be reporting back to you. And there is a process that's going on right now to develop what I call procedures. There's about 22 of them, which we didn't have. The procedures help you with consistency across the organization. And so when you audit an issue, you should be able to pull a file and say, I need to see these 5 things on this file. And you should be able to see those and be able to go back and know how we went through our specifications, how we sent out the document to the market, who responded, how it was opened and when, and who was present, how was the evaluation taken, and who signed off on the evaluation. So that's a totally different and new process that's in place. And so the comments that I'm hearing from the delegation, I think they are well placed. And the reference point, which is really fair to them, is because they are looking at what has happened before and saying, how is that addressed here? And how that's addressed is addressed on the process side, which is where we're going to involve our vendors through the process. The issue of vendor relations, it's not one person sitting down and saying, I'm looking at vendor X today, and this is the rating I'm giving them. Vendor management is a process that's collaborative between the one receiving the service and the vendor. And it's not a one-time deal. So you go through that vendor process, it goes to somebody else to look at and revalidate. So nothing is going to be thrown in somebody's file because one person has decided that this person is not doing what we're expecting them to do. And the delegation is right, that some of the vendor issues are really because of things that we as a city are doing or not providing on time. So there is that process where they would provide that feedback. So the major work that's going to be done is really on the procedures, and those procedures will be available to members of the public so that they can hold us as staff to say, this is what I'm expecting, and this didn't happen or this happened. And there is a validation and monitoring process in place. Thank you.
Okay, I'm still confused because we've got the policy, and like Mr. Cake stated, numbers 4 and 5 talk about holding a vendor open house and incorporating feedback from the vendors, and you yourself said it was a chicken and egg thing. So if we adopt the policy, how do we get any feedback on it from people?
The process is through the process of amending. So how do you keep the process? Here's the issue.
Okay, so that's where I got confused. It says, because it says transformation, the policy is proceeding is followed, and you're going to hold vendor open house feedback on amendments to the policy, not on the policy itself.
Right.
So that makes it more clear to me.
So through the chair, my last comment is this. Why I called it a chicken and egg issue. For us, it was a simple discussion as to who's driving this bus. It's a policy issue, it's a governance issue, it has to start at this table. Then we'll take it to our vendors, we'll go through that process, we'll come back and say, this is what we've had. If I start the other way around, then who is driving the bus?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. A very important topic to be certain, and recognizing that our core services review that was undertaken, and I think it's a really salient and important point that the Public Works and Engineering Department, this comes as a result of our core services review and a second set of consultants hired to undertake a procurement policy review for improvements moving forward. Would that be a reasonable explanation? And those two consultants indicated to us sometime in, I think, October, that by April of 2017, they should be back to us with the respective documents and education and awareness and a myriad of policies and procedures and scenarios that will benefit the city's purchasing policies moving forward. Is that correct? So I'm a little bit on the assumption that sometime in April, May, we're going to hear back from them that may, in fact, have information or suggestions for inclusion in this, what I hope is a fluid procurement policy that we can return with their recommendations to insert into this policy later this year if warranted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And is it also correct that their recommendations to us upon review, and the professionals in the industry have suggested that they have discovered $4 to $6 million of savings on an annual basis in one department moving forward?
So that was out of the cost service review. That's correct.
That is correct. For every year moving forward. Is that correct?
So that's from a savings perspective, you only get savings once. So it's going to be a one-time saving, because once you dial this back, you get this big wang of savings.
Thank
After
you.
that, it's more efficiency.
So I understand that. Yeah. So we're resetting the bar where it should be one time, which will result in a $4 to $6 million savings. And if we adhere to the professionals' recommendations, we should remain at that bar, plus or minus, given our projects and everything else that's going on. So for me, it's an every year savings of $4 to $6 million. And I don't think that that point can be understated, and that the necessity to come forward with this new procurement policy. And if we can make some changes to this, we can amend this when they come back again in April or May, then I would like to think that we can also come back and amend things after you've done the open house with the vendors who are willing to come forward. Because as our delegation has said, and other members of the council have said before, there's a whole lot of vendors that aren't willing to come forward for retribution. And I could probably name 100 of them. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring forward also vendors in this open house and marry their thoughts with the consultants. They're on the ground, they're doing the business. I'll probably, because of time, but this is a pretty critical issue here, and I don't know where in here is the approved product list.
Not anyway.
So when do we revisit the approved product list?
I think there's commitment that a couple of months down the road, we will do that. I think
Thank you.
it's...
Because I'm also concerned, as Councillor Kipp is about past practices and how things have been driven. And they need to have some adjustments to them. So I'm glad we're going in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at after 9 o'clock, and we said we were going to take a break at 9. What's council's pleasure, to continue the debate and complete this one, or go into a break? Councillor Brennan.
I'd like to complete this, and then I would like to do the cultural and heritage grants. I'm feeling quite feverish and I would like to be able to get the people's work done and then go into in camera.
Okay.
So that would be my preference.
Yep.
Worship, you have recess at 9 o'clock and go back in to deal with the in-camera.
So we're considering that that the scheduled recess is part of the agenda. So we're going to go to recess.
I would agree that we go to 9:15, get whatever this item that we're on, the next two items, knock them off, and at 9:15, we can, and I don't know how to amend the agenda to reflect that, but let's knock a couple of things off here and finish this topic off here. So people that were here for this topic can leave, and then whatever the next topic is that Councillor Brennan and otherwise want to get through, it shouldn't be that onerous.
Motion to postpone the break till 9:15.
Well, the challenge that you have is you have, under the Culture and Heritage Grant recommendations, you have 2 delegations. There's at least 30 minutes.
Then I would move that we extend the break till 9:30. And these people.
There is a motion on the floor. The staff recommendation is on the floor.
Correct. Okay.
Well, I'm trying to accommodate Councillor Brennan if she's ill, but if you are also leaving at 9:30, then I'm quite happy to break right now.
We're going to go to break.
In the middle of a motion.
Right.
dollars on supply management that can be saved.
Council.
One of my concerns with that $5 million one-time offer from 2009, when the core review was first asked for, and this process would have changed some of this. That's probably about $5 million a year for 6 years that gone out the door. As far as who's driving the bus, I heard the comment, so who's driving this bus? Well, there was an old process, and we had that in paperwork. And so, again, it's not consultation when you write something and go out and ask people if that's good. We seem to get caught in that. We got caught tonight, people saying we're going out and giving all this information and we're not consulting. I would have preferred to drive the bus by, take the old process out to the public and the people that are involved and review it there and then come back with the lists. And so for me, and about the chicken and the egg, no chicken ever came first. It's always the egg. Chickens don't come first. So I'd just like to say that this has been a 5-year process to get to some of this correction. I appreciate what staff is doing.
Thank you. Now, I did have some other speakers in there, but I did clear the queue, and I believe that they wanted to speak about the issue of the break. So, any other speakers with respect to the motion that's on the floor? Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Well, I think this is a progress. I think we are making progress. I think that this is that's something that we have to do. If we don't undertake this, then what? So the questions that I asked of staff was, will we have the ability when the consultants come back within 2 or 3 months or whatever that date is, and the open houses are undertaken with the vendors that attend, if this document is fluid and we can bring it back with amendments for council that may make sense in making the document a stronger document. I heard the answer was yes. So on the condition that I have staff's commitment that that is the case, then I'm quite comfortable to proceed with the motion in front of us.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, that there was a couple of things that I wanted to add, and one is that some time ago, Councillor Hong put forward a motion with respect to a social procurement policy, and I don't see it included anywhere in here other than the brief, the community benefit issue. The other one was I want to remove the language the lawsuits. And that is that if somebody files a lawsuit against the city, that there will be retribution, which is you cannot apply, you cannot be a vendor for 5 years. So those two items there, I've got some concerns about. As it stands right now, I can't support the motion, even though I like many of the items that are in it. Mr. Mema.
So there's two aspects of the policy, I think, that just reference and provides direction to staff to go work out the details. One is social procurement, the other one is sustainable procurement. So what's in the policy is the what, is what you would like us to do. We would then develop, I was talking to Councillor Keep just before we went in camera, that just for example, the sustainable procurement is minimum 15 pages of how to do that. And so you will see that coming back. You'll see something coming back on social procurement, social enterprise, and stuff like that coming back as direction coming from those brief mentions in the policy. The policy speaks to the what you would like us to do. Then we'll bring you the how as direction in the procedures as to how we'll proceed with doing that. Thank you.
Okay, so if I could, about 4 years ago, we had a conversation about a relatively equal clause with respect to the ability to be able to provide award to a local company based on a relatively equal scoring system. We were told at the time that free trade agreements wouldn't allow us to do that. However, I see a number of communities that are doing it. So my concern is, how did they do it, bearing in mind that we do have the New West Partnership and we have the free trade agreements. So I would like to see us go down that road a little bit first. Just a comment. Councillor Brennan. Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Based on the conversation then, is there a sense of urgency to this, Mr. Mema, to be adopted, approved tonight? Is there a resolution that we must do this tonight?
There's two parts to my question. The first one is you have sent us to change the way we are doing business, assuming that you do not accept the status quo. So that's agency number one. Agency number two is everything else that we're doing on the project is dependent on this, because this is the governance piece that sets the framework of what happens afterwards. So that's the second piece of the agency. So what you have in front of you is you're not casting anything in stone, as I say. It gives us direction at least to proceed with the project. And when we have the entire package, there's things I'm promising here and saying there's 22 procedures. Until we have that, until we have the training, everything else in place, you can now see the full picture of what we are trying to implement. So we would like to proceed with at least having this fluid piece of direction so we can do the other stuff. Otherwise, then we may have to move forward the April window, and that comes with costs in terms of the people helping us. Thank you.
Sorry to belabor this at this hour, but to the mayor's point about that local assist factor on the scoring, so are we going to get an opportunity, if we approve this, to be able to bring those topics of concerns back to the table in 2017 and put them into the document of governance or the next document? Like, there's some really good points that have been made, and we don't have these points to make until such time as we get here in this deliberation. So I think it's important.
Through the chair, the local procurement piece. I understand that you would see it in other municipalities. The facts that they have it in there doesn't make it legal. So all we know from a legal perspective, there's case law where this has been challenged. People go on the thought that, well, who's going to challenge a 20,000 award that we're making to the local person? We don't know. That's a risk that you take. What I have said at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting is that part of this reach out to local vendors is to promote the local aspect of this. So instead of us having a policy statement that says we will provide this to local vendors, it makes no sense if the local vendors don't even know what we're buying. So we want to reach out. We want to be able to give them the opportunity by backing up that local preference, by making sure that they have the full knowledge of how to do business with us and when those opportunities arise for them, without us offending the agreements, whatever they are. So that will be our comment. So local preference is to us a priority, and we achieve that through engaging with our local vendors, making sure that the access and opportunity is expanded for local vendors as to how that can actually happen. I think the delegation did point a good point where he's saying at least there's one thing that's beginning to work, which is we are beginning to share that local economy here by making sure that the contract lengths or terms are reasonably short enough so that people have chances to bid instead of having this long term and somebody's waiting for 5 years. So if you shorten that, that gives the local economy, the local vendor, more chances to actually participate in that process. So that's how you support local preference.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yoakum.
Just quickly, I support the speaker's conversation. I look forward to a day when we have local preference when it's within realm in our purchases, but also in our hiring processes as well. Thank you.
I wonder if I could. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we have something that discriminates against participants in purchasing or selling goods to us. It was a recognition of local taxpayers. It was a recognition of local employment. It was a recognition of community contribution, and it's a recognition of employers who employ those who are otherwise employment challenged. That was always my intent of a social procurement policy. Seeing as I don't see it here, I can't support this as it is right now. We have a purchasing bylaw in place. The Core Services Review said we needed to make some changes. We recognize a number of wholesale changes that we want to make, and I'd like to continue that dialogue on and get it put to bed before I can approve this. In any case, Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I will support the bylaw because I think even though we support this, I think there is room for amendments that we can constantly work towards given staff time. So I like it better than the last version. So I'm willing to support this version in hopes next time we'll do a better job. Thank you.
So I'm going to call the question. The motion is on the floor. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? So Councillor Kipp, Mayor McKay, and Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion carries. So next one is that purchasing power delegation bylaw. It's a recommendation that Council 1 give first, second, and third readings to purchasing power delegation bylaw, delegation repeal bylaw 2017 number 7235, and give first, second, and third readings to purchasing power delegation bylaw 2017 number 7236. So you're repealing one, the current language, and you are adding new language under the bylaw. So moved. Do we need to do them separately? Okay, so let's do the first one, which is the repeal. So you're moving the repeal. Seconder, Councillor Fuller. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Give first, second, third readings to purchasing power delegation bylaw 2017 number 7236. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now we're into the bylaws. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair.
We've actually done that all together, and we're okay with that. You're off the hook.
I don't need to read them.
You're off.
All right.
So, next item. Community Services, 2017 Culture and Heritage Grant Recommendations. We have 2 delegations. First one is Mr. Andrew Homsey. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Andrew Homsey, and I'm a citizen of Nanaimo, and I live at 180 Pirates Lane. And I'm here as a representative of the Nanaimo International Jazz Festival Association, and we're a group that is planning on producing a jazz festival right here in Nanaimo. This whole idea revolves around the fact that Nanaimo has the only public place that I'm aware of that is actually named after a jazz musician. And of course, that's the Diana Krall Plaza. And as everybody here knows, I'm sure, Diana Krall is the best well-known Canadian jazz musician alive today. And we would like to see an opportunity to hear jazz music played in the Diana Krall Plaza on a regular basis, particularly through the impetus of this festival. And the festival this year is important for a number of reasons. It marks the 100th anniversary of the very first jazz recording that was made on February 26th, 1917. And there you'll see the musicians that played on that very first recording. They are all from New Orleans. They went up the river to Chicago. They ended up in New York, and they set the world on fire with the first jazz recording. Of course, there were many other recordings that came after that. So we want, we have a board. We've been in existence for almost 2 years now. We've been working very hard on this, and we have we've been moving forward on this, and we were very pleased to learn that we were recommended for a cultural and heritage grant. We want to celebrate Nanaimo musicians. We want to integrate them with international musicians. We want to make Nanaimo a home for jazz, just as it is well known as a home for blues and a home for classical music. And there you see some 4 Nanaimo musicians who played at a recent event that we had in the Port Theatre. We've been very lucky to have, seems like I'm missing a slide here, but we now have funding from 4 different sources. Well, I guess the 4th one will be decided later today, but from the TD Bank, from the Nanaimo Foundation, and from the Hospitality Grant. So we have enough money to launch a modest festival in the year 2017, which also coincides with Canada's 150th anniversary. So we have these 2 anniversaries coinciding. And also, I just want to say one last thing, is on that first recording by that band, they recorded a piece by a Canadian composer, an African-Canadian composer by the name of Shelton Brooks. So we have a lot to celebrate, and the music is great, and we have a lot of energy and enthusiasm to move forward with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick has a question for you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Are you working with the Celebration 150?
Sorry?
Are you working with the 150 anniversary celebration?
Yes, that came through the Nanaimo Foundation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. This is quite an exciting beginning, I think, and coming with the anniversary of the first recording and the fact that it was a black artist, a Canadian artist, is really, I think, really something to celebrate. So I'm really happy this is happening. Is there anything that you, besides the money, what are the kinds of things that you would like to see the city do?
Well, thank you for asking that question. New Orleans is recognized as the city that gave birth to jazz. And like those musicians I showed you right there, all the important early jazz recordings featured musicians from New Orleans. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Nanaimo could become a sister city with New Orleans in this year, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the first recording? I don't know what the processes would be, but I've done some research on this, and I think if we were able to pursue that, I think it'd be very exciting to bring some musicians from New Orleans to participate in our very first jazz festival.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no further questions for you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brennan.
This is a question for staff, and I think that that's a really interesting idea, and I think it's a really exciting idea during this year for us, because I know we have I can't say sequessential or whatever, the 150th anniversary. I'm wondering, would it be possible for the presenter to meet with our staff and just talk a little bit about how that process of sistering with another city might be developed? Could that happen, Ms. Sarah?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then I will leave it up to staff and Dale and the presenter to get together and talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Our next delegation is Ms. Joy Bremner from the Mid-Island Métis Nation. Good evening.
Now, excuse me because I do have a cold, so I will do the best that I can. Joy Bremner, I do reside in Nanaimo.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council, and staff. My name is Kelty Chamberlain, and I reside in Nanaimo as well.
I'm the leader of the Mid-Island Métis Nation, and I'm a Cree Métis out of Saskatchewan. My Métis family name is Bruce, which comes from the Red River settlement. And Kelty herself is the Mid-Island Métis Nation Women's Rep. And so it's a great opportunity for a younger woman. At this point, we also, as we're standing here, we'd like to acknowledge that we're in the Nanaimo territory. And the fact that we live, learn, work, and play here. Myself, there's 5 generations of my family have lived in the Nanaimo area, so it's not like we're new to town. So Tanshe, we've requested an appearance here in front of Mayor and Council this evening on behalf of the Mid-Island Métis Nation to thank you and all of the staff that have shown the Métis community support, not only through the Culture and Heritage Grant, but throughout the years as well as we participate in city parks and in a wide range of activities. City staff are always getting in touch with us if there's an opportunity that maybe we would like to come and participate. And we certainly delight in that and sharing our culture and being present. Excuse me. So we'd also like to provide a bit of an introduction in terms of who the Mid-Island Métis Nation is. There are 1,200, or just over 1,200 registered members in our community. There's over 2,000 Métis in the city of Nanaimo itself. We've been here since the 1800s. As many of you may have heard, Joseph Mackay had come with the Hudson Bay Company back in the day, and he had many businesses that he ran here in town. And the Mid-Island actually has a mission statement that we use to celebrate and promote Métis heritage, to develop and implement training, education, and economic opportunities while ensuring effective communications to all our members on Central Vancouver Island. Now, an interesting piece about the Métis is the fact that we're not federally or provincially funded, so we have no core funding. So, and when you look at the different things that happen in this community that are about the Métis and our participation, that's driven by the volunteer efforts, the fundraising that we go out there and do, and the occasional grant that we're actually able to acquire. Some of my notes I actually wrote by hand, so I can't read them this late in the evening. My apologies. Yes, and so then weekly events, and we have a number of different things that we do regularly. We have a weekly beading circle. We also have a weekly sewing and craft circle that's done with a number of the other elders from around the island. And you can see at various times the participation levels vary greatly, and it isn't just the Métis. We also participate with all of the other urban Aboriginals, and they're open. All of our events are open to everybody. And one of the major things that we do is actually assist with membership applications. And I mean, in the last year, there were 170 applications for Métis status. We managed to process 100 of those. And it's no simple matter in order to do that. It's very time consuming. And we estimate if everyone actually shows up with everything all in line and in their folder, it takes a minimum of 3 hours for us to process that. Very often it goes on to 10 or 15 or 20 hours in order to assist them to get through that process, because it's not always easy to follow their genealogy. Our monthly events then range from participation in local festivals. We're up at VIU at a number of their events as well. We do the Métis Welcome Feast in the fall when students come back to university. We have Aboriginal Family Night once a month. And that participation and attendance at that event ranges anywhere up to 180 or 200 people. And this is it's a family event. Everyone, again, across the board is welcome to attend that. We always have a cultural host that comes in and, either dancing or crafting or different things at that event as well. We have our own community events, monthly, our community meetings, and occasionally they're potlucks, or we also conduct business on occasion at those. Now, the Métis culture is colorful, interesting, and can be challenging, but it's definitely meaningful to all of the Métis citizens who participate. And of course, we cannot overlook our National Aboriginal Day celebration in Bowen Park, and our partners there, of course, have been the Boys and Girls Club and the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center, as well as a number of others. We can't discount that there have been numerous people come on board with that, because it's a huge, popular, and successful event. City staff actually estimated we had over 5,000 people attend last year. And we actually participate in 35 public events throughout the year, from school events to our own events, but all of the festivals that occur. And again, remember that this is all done with volunteers. We do a large event with this local school district, which is Métis Awareness Days, and just over 200 students and schools apply, and so anywhere from 7 to 8 schools will bring students to attend. We actually sash the VIU grads as well as School District 68 grads. The Métis grads, we attend and actually present them with a sash and show them how to put it on. And there is a local woman that is actually hand weaving the sashes now for us, which is spectacular because it's almost a lost art. And I think one of the things for us is the fact that we've looked to develop so many partnerships, as we don't have a lot of funding and we work with volunteers, not trying to duplicate services or things that other agencies are offering has been really important in order to partner with all of these different groups. That and we're then able to provide and direct our community to services and activities that they would be in need of. And we're also, at this time, with the new board this year, we're looking at doing a strategic plan just to ensure that we're following through in terms of what our membership and our community is interested in having us do. And, sorry, I'm about to wrap up here. And the objective of our nation, of course, is to continue on a path developing a stable community with the opportunity for growth and ensuring that we're serving the community in areas that they're actually wanting to be served. And we certainly appreciate the supportive nature of the city of Nanaimo, and even the having, put it forward that we are eligible for some grant money again this year. The money that we have received from the city in the past gives us a base of at least something to start with each year. And it has been very successful, and we appreciate completely, what we've been able to do with that in terms of our community. And I believe that our citizens, as their business owners, they own homes, and they have children in the school district, they're really solid citizens in the city of Nanaimo. And I think we would simply like to thank once again the mayor and council and the city staff that have been of such assistance to us over the years.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that that day I was looking at the slide there of Aboriginal Day, and it reminded me, I was fondly reminded of the warm sun beating down on us during that event. And it's always a really good event because there's so many people there that are there for purpose of learning and learning more, in addition to the celebration. Yes. So again, for all of the folks involved, yourselves, the Aboriginal Centre, Nanaimo, it's a wonderful event. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions for you. Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegation. Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Pratt. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So there's a recommendation on page 73 that Council approve the 2017 Culture and Heritage Grant Funding. This is project and operating. Recommendations of $316,519 as outlined below. You've got it in your package. Moved by Councillor Kipp. Seconded by Councillor Brennan. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I have two quick questions through you, if I may, to staff. My first one is, last year there was quite an extensive process whereby the criteria for application and judging grants was revised and hopefully improved. And I'm wondering if staff could just comment on how effective that proved to be in terms of easing their decision making, because I know it's sometimes very difficult to make decisions on these grants.
Thank you, Worship. All accounts that I received from staff is that process has worked well. I would note that we are, though, committed to Council to review the grant process as part of the recommendations coming out of the core review, so to look at the entire grant process and how we may incorporate this in the future. So.
Okay. And if I may, my second question through you, Chair, is as part of the criteria and the process which is in place now, Mr. Lindsay, is there accountability for the various groups that receive these grants to demonstrate how the money is used and report back at some point?
Yes, Your Worship, that's contained in the grant assessment criteria.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a motion on the floor. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're running into a time issue. I would like a couple things here. First off, is there a motion from council to go beyond 11 o'clock? So there's a motion from Councillor Kipper. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the Councillor Hong.
Are we finish or are we going to set a time?
You're the movers of the motion.
20 more minutes, 11:20.
Okay, so till 11:20, and you're seconding that. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So, I wonder if I could, before you do that, if we can, because I think some of these other ones might have some debate involved. Can we do the bylaw? Move the bylaw. There's a motion on page 172 about the adoption of a certain bylaw. Bylaw 2016 number 4500.096 to rezone a portion of 1099 Bruce Avenue from steep slope residential R10 to townhouse residential R6 to permit a 21-unit townhouse development be adopted. Moved by Councillor Kipp. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item is temporary public art selections. There's a motion, a recommendation on page 83. So we'll call Councillor Kipp the mover and Councillor Brennan the seconder. Discussion. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Just with regards to the Gene Burns project, what is it and where is it going?
It's hoarding along the building, the existing building site. One of the former artists that worked there is Mrs. Hoffman, is putting hoarding, on all the hoarding that's around the building, she's going to paint pictures, I think, or do artwork.
But aren't they going to be tearing that building down sooner than later?
It's on page 86 of your agenda, Councillor.
Yeah, I saw that, but it doesn't really have a pretty picture like all these other ones do. It just says painted panels on the construction hoarding, approximately 6 to 8 feet tall. Like, is it covering the whole building? It would be nice to have some more detail compared to these other ones here. It's very lacking.
It would only cover the whole building if the building's only 8 feet tall.
Just didn't know where it was going.
Panels, just the fence panels. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Worship. I can just clarify, if the building is demolished, there obviously need to be some hoarding around the property to secure that. There'd probably be some grade difference between the sidewalk and the finished grade, obviously, at the bottom of the foundation. So that hoarding potentially could be placed on that fencing during time of reconstruction of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Proposed land exchange at 5200 Rutherford Road. Recommendation on page 90 that council provide approval to acquire 686.9 square meters of land from the owner at 5200 Rutherford Road in exchange for 640.6 square meters of city-owned land at 5290 Rutherford Road. So it's moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Liquor license number LA 124 at 709 Nanaimo Lakes Road. There's a recommendation on page 95 that council recommend the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch approve an application to increase the licensed capacity for the existing liquor primary license for the property located at 709 Nanaimo Lakes Road from 212 persons to 568 persons. And is there a mover?
Mayor and Council, I'm going to declare myself in conflict because this is a liquor license application. I own a liquor license.
Yep. Move the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Mr. Lindsay?
Comments before council considers the motion. This is a bit unusual because it is.
Can you let us finish moving it first?
I'm sorry.
Who was seconding it? Councillor Kemp, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. This is a bit unusual because it's federal property, a federal building. So normally when we bring these forward to you, our building department has vetted them and made sure that they comply with building code and that the number that's being asked for ultimately complies. So in terms of exiting, in terms of overall floor area, in terms of washrooms. Staff have not done that here because of the jurisdiction. We're relying on a letter that's been provided by the fire chief at the base to determine that number. So council, when you're making a decision, I would just ask you to keep that in mind. And I know the recommendation was to approve, but council may want to also consider either supporting in principle the use, to clarify that you're commenting on the use and the confirmation of compliance, subject to confirmation of compliance with relative codes, or the alternate option is always available to council of no comment, at which point it would refer back to the province and they would make the decision on that.
If I could, did the report not say, however, that a motion of no comment could considerably delay this application?
That's correct, Your Worship, because right now the province relies on us to do the engagement, which we've done. There's been no opposition that's been received. A motion of no comment would then require the province to basically trigger their own process. I would add to that, though, that in the past we have issued special occasion licenses for this property. So if there's an event in the near term, that's something that we could, again, consider.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Should this increase from whatever it is, 260 to 540 or whatever it is, does that remain on that property if there's a transfer of ownership? So does that liquor license remain with that property, with that capacity?
Yes, Your Worship, it could certainly run with the land if the license is granted. That's correct, yes.
So in other words, should this property be transferred, or then by virtue of something that's been a special occasions license for special occasions only of up to 4, according to the report, maybe 4 times a year, and we haven't reviewed the property because it falls under a federal jurisdiction on whether it meets floor area ratios, on whether it meets exiting and egress and all of those things in the event of a fire or who knows what. But you did say that the fire department hasn't had any concerns or issues, but that's not been with the upwards of 546 patrons, as I would understand it. So my thought is that if this is going to be something that will be attached to this property for all time, I would prefer to have no comment.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Besser's comments would be, it's federal today, may not remain federal down the road. So if it got transferred to city's municipal jurisdiction, that's what I'm concerned about. I don't want to handcuff ourselves, but I guess we don't have a say anyways today. But I just don't want to handcuff ourselves to potential land use down the road and how that may look. That's all. But I respect today that we don't have much say on that. So I agree. I would like to have no comment. Just some concerns about the future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I see no further questions. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillors Fuller, Thorpe, Bestwick, and Yoakum opposed. Motion fails. Is there an alternate motion? So Councillor Bestwick's moving to make no comment and seconded by Councillor Yoakum. Is there any discussion on that question? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Next item, development permit number DP 993 at 507, 511, 515 Milton Street and 745, 755 Albert Street. There's a recommendation on page 125. Pardon me? Pardon me? Yeah. So the motion is that council issue development permit number DP 993 at 507, 511, 515 Milton Street, 745, 755 Albert Street with the following variances. Increase the maximum allowable building height for building A from 10.5 to 10.8 meters. Reduce the required parking for 25 multi-family residential units from 25 to 19 spaces, and reduce the required loading spaces from 1 to 0. Is there a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Thorpe, seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Development permit number DP 1022 and development variance permit number DVP 300 at 3330 Stevenson Point Road. And it's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 300 at 3330 Stevenson Point Road. For the second time, anyone wishing to speak to 3330 Stevenson Point Road? And for the third and final time, anyone wishing to speak to DVP 300 at 3330 Stevenson Point Road? Seeing none. There are two recommendations on page 144. Can we have a mover, please? Councillor Hong? Thank you. And a seconder. Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Are we talking about two dwellings here?
No, Your Worship, it's one single-family dwelling.
Thank you. Second question is the qualified environmental professional summary notes for the dwelling to be proposed to be located further back on the property than the existing house with a 6.79 meter watercourse setback. Can you help me understand these variances from the watercourse setback? Because we, on occasion, find ourselves in some precedents, and I know it's not one. Whoops, I'm sorry. I know it's not one size fits all. In the neighborhood association comment, there wasn't one. So I'm just wondering, can you help me out with how this will impact any future variances of similar properties? I know it's a rhetorical question.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do really look at these as a case-by-case basis. I think each site is unique and will have its own attributes. We'll factor into things such as, has the property previously been disturbed? This property does have an existing home on it. As Councillor Beswick mentioned, they are proposing to remove that home and actually increase the setback. We'll be looking at the nature of the setback. So in this case, the variance is down to 6.79 meters, but that's actually to a cantilever deck that projects into the space. The actual setback to the building is 9.57 meters. And lastly, we'll also be looking at what sort of compensation is being proposed. And in this case, we actually have the consultant who recommended 90 square meters of the land be replanted with native species, and we're able to secure just over 200 square meters. So when we look at all of those factors on this unique application, we believe it's a supportable variance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no. Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I always have these issues with regards to the side setbacks for heat pumps, because I think they should belong in the backyard. But under this circumstance, I do support it because next to it is a road that will never be used, so it's not going to bother the neighbors. So I do support the variances that are being asked by this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is remedial action order at 1241 Woodland Street.
May I just, that was on the last one, that was 1 and 2, just, no,
Yep.
just for,
Yep.
that was 2.
Was 1 and 2. So, recommendation is on page 164, and it's fairly lengthy, so I'm not going to read it out. Can we have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Hong, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, remedial action order at 773 Hunter Street. And there's a recommendation on page 167. It's to obtain council authorization to pursue remedial action to upgrade or remove the deck at 773 Hunter Street. And is there a mover for the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is bylaw contravention notices, and there are 4 of them. First one is, the first thing we need to do is request that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the bylaw contravention notice for the properties listed. And the first one is 5638 Christina Crescent, 59 Porter Road, 305 View Street, and 5364 Vincent Place. For the second time, and for the third and final time, seeing none, call for a recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Hong and seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it, with the exception of that one item, which was rise and report. Do we have... I'm going to go back here. Pardon me. Pardon me? That's right. I'm just looking for the names. Pardon me? Yeah, I'm getting it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Council tonight selected and affirmed that for a 3-year term, Ms. Kaylee Defer, is that how we pronounce it? Will be our new Poet Laureate. There's also that's Ms. Tina Bilo will take the position of the Poet Laureate, and Ms. Kaylee Defer will be the inaugural for 1 year Youth Poet Laureate. And I'm looking forward to Ms. Defer's work. I was witness to one of her pieces. I believe Councillor Pratt and Councillor Thorpe may well have been there. It's going to be edgy. I'll tell you that right now. Congratulations to both of them. We really look forward to it. Those are big shoes to fill. So, last but not least, question period. Seeing none, motion to adjourn.
Leon Cake, 5936 Canoe. I just want to make a comment tonight after sitting in so many council meetings and watching, individuals come up to the podium on issues they have in their lives. And I'm really concerned about an issue tonight that was presented, and this is this fella that was here, and he couldn't stay. He was getting tired. 432 Howard Avenue, this contaminated soil site. Here's a man living in Nanaimo, taking free fill for whatever reasons, and maybe I don't know all the information, but he seemed to be telling the truth. And then I look at the process of what we did in our own city here on Wall Street, Cliff Avenue, with contaminated soil, and we paid a $357,000 extra to a contract because we didn't handle it right. We basically told this guy 30 days and fix this. But yet, we're not saying to this person, can we help you? Should we be going back as the city with some legal support for this fellow to go back to the person that gave him that soil? if they knew it was contaminated, or was there a report done? When the city authorizes a building permit for anything near the railway, it's historic. The trains have leached from the creosote of those ties to the trains just leaking as they went up and down the rails. So anything along that corridor, to me, would be like a contaminated corridor. Whether we establish that or recognize that, I don't know. But I watched this man tonight go out of here. This could be $30,000 to $40,000. And we gave him 30 days to clean it up, but we're not offering anything to him. We're not even looking at, how do we stop this from happening again from somebody saying free fill? Is there a policy in the city to test free fill? How did this move from this site by a trucking firm or whoever to his property? But now he's got 30 days to clean this up. And I don't know how anybody who can sit here, how would you guys feel if it was you? You took free soil. You put it on your property. You find out it's contaminated. And then you hear tonight how the process goes. Because I've been studying contaminated soil and how it moves because of that Cliff Street site. Because we paid a lot of money for that. And we didn't do it right. We didn't get the permits. We didn't have the right information. And now we see some citizen tonight go out of here with, as far as I'm concerned, other than just 30 days to clean it up. I don't think that's support from a council. I think there should be more. I think there should have been some sort of support to maybe litigation. He was blindsided by this. So I just want to make this comment to each and every one of you there. How would you feel, anybody in this council chamber tonight, if you took free fill and you found out it was contaminated? How did that soil move? How did that soil get from the site, not get recognized as contaminated, but it ends up, was there, hey, don't say nothing, he's going to take the soil. So I just want to put that to council to look at this. Should there be a policy about any movement of soil in the city of Nanaimo that's free or moves from one site to another? Is it a policy to check to see if it's contaminated? The contamination I heard tonight was recognized in that soil. Someone can't tell me that they didn't smell this. Something's not right here. And this poor guy now has got 30 days. And I'm not saying he looks like a millionaire, but I'm not saying he looks like a poor guy. But he looks like a lost guy. And when I talked to him, I said, I'm going to wait to speak to this for him. And I hope this council can look at this, what I'm saying tonight, and recognize, I know you've made the motion, you've told them 30 days to clean it up, but if we haven't got passion and we haven't got a heart at this council for things like this, if we can't sit and deliberate here to help people that get blindsided, or maybe their thinking was just not right because maybe at times they don't think right, and they go, free fill. It's like seeing an old couch on the side of the road, and you pick it up because it's free, and you take it home and you find out it's full of garbage, but then you can get rid of it. But this is different. This is contaminated soil. This is a huge issue. I'm learning and reading about it, provincial, because you know what? It's going to be a big issue because there's more and more contaminants going in the ground because of what we've got in our earth and what we have in our system. So I just hope this council reviews what happened tonight to this poor man, and maybe somebody gets back to him from staff. But there needs to be a policy about something, how something can move soil-wise, that it could be contaminated. And here's this poor bugger. He's got free fill that just cost him, I don't know, maybe $30,000. Anyway, just want to make that point to council.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Well, I appreciate Mr. Cake's point of view. However, I believe the first order was back in October, so effectively he's had 120 days to remove the soil, not just 30. Also, something that we might have wanted to ask him was maybe he was paid to take that soil. And we didn't ask him that.
Good question, George.
Yeah.
Sir.
No, so there's good questions that should have been asked, and that would have been one of them. And if he was paid to take the soil, then it would have been behooved him to find out whether it was contaminated or not. So, yeah, it's an interest.
Well, I just wanted to correct Gord. I think it was in June is when we first got the complaint. The bylaws went, according to Mr. Davidson. So.
There's supposed to be a permit to move fill. You're supposed to apply for it, especially in a building site. If you're excavating as much as you did in that site, somebody should have been on top of that.
Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. We're adjourned.
Okay.